If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 151, Origin and End. There is always a place for darkness that is separated for obvious reasons from the light. During the creation of the known worlds long before their destruction, there was a dark and desolate place where those who went against the desires of the gods were punished. Have you ever wondered if a god is good or bad? He has the power to remove evil from the world, to punish those who only cause destruction and misfortune. But he doesn't. Does that make him a bad god? Many say it's something caused by free will, but before the worlds were destroyed, a special world was created to punish the dead who committed unforgivable sins. It was then that in the dawn of time, when the worlds were still young and the stars stretched in the firmament like glimmers of hope, there existed a place feared by all beings with special abilities, a place that was only whispered in the deepest shadows of the divine realms, the primordial abyss. According to ancient legends, the primordial abyss was not always a dark and terrifying place. In time immemorial, it was a paradise for lost souls, a neutral realm where the dead could find solace and redemption. The gods, in their wisdom, had created this place as a corner where wandering souls could purify themselves and, ultimately, be reunited with the gods or reincarnated into new living beings. However, greed and envy seeped even into the divine hearts. Some gods were tempted by the power emanating from the primordial abyss. They began to experiment with the souls residing there, imposing cruel and dark punishments on the dead who had committed impure acts in life. The authority of the gods over the abyss became tyrannical, and their thirst for punishment became insatiable. In their arrogance, these gods created monstrous creatures from the tortured souls, giving life to abominations that tormented both the living and the dead. The darkness emanating from the primordial abyss spread like a plague, shrouding the world in a cloak of despair. The benevolent gods, horrified by the corruption of their peers, united to curb this growing darkness. However, their efforts were in vain, as the dark beings had woven an intricate web of dark magic around the abyss, and not even the gods could undo it. Finally, the benevolent gods decided to make a supreme sacrifice to save the world. They sealed the dark abyss in a dimension completely separate from the known worlds. In that uncontrollable situation, that dimension separated from the others became a thing of the past. Years turned into centuries, and the primordial abyss became an eternal prison and a place of unbreakable torment. The dark gods, deprived of their power, finally faded away, and their legacy of evil dissipated into history. Thus, the primordial abyss remained as a reminder of the fragility of the gods and the corrupting power of ego. But everything changed when the gods died. All worlds except for the human one were destroyed, and the ancient tree was designated to the human world by the moon elves and the human guardians at that time. Somehow, the ancient tree became connected to the dark abyss, forming the special portal that was nearly destroyed by Gilgamesh. When Gilgamesh looked into the past of those races corrupted by society, he felt pity, but he couldn't allow those beings to ascend to life. It would be a real headache if they were granted freedom. For this very reason, he decided to destroy that place entirely and prevent further problems. What are you thinking about so much? Roxy walked over to where Gilgamesh was and sat down beside him in the middle of the night. Her tranquil and serene gaze was something unique that only she could have when next to Gilgamesh. Do you think I deserve a second chance? This unusual question from Gilgamesh left Roxy pensive. She didn't expect something like that, but she thought about it carefully. Before she could give an answer, Gilgamesh said, "I'm tired of bathing in blood, taking lives, and following this path until the end of my life. I know I have to do something before I retire from the world, but I'm still tired of it." Gilgamesh had spent his entire previous life at war against the gods, died on his feet and in a sea of blood. His life before that ended in a puddle of blood, so it made him wonder, what will happen in this life? Roxy looked at the beautiful, colorful sky in the middle of the night, feeling calmer than usual today, and said, "We all need a second chance, not from others but from ourselves. I've been thinking a lot, and after getting out of here, I want to visit my parents. Everything I suffered in the past no longer exists, and now that I think about it, it was always something small." Gilgamesh smiled and asked, "Do you really want to be my wife? I know it might be hasty, sudden, and strange for you, but I'd like to know what you think." "I'm not thinking of anything special, I had simply resigned myself to having a man by my side for the rest of my life. I had planned to find a new disciple and retreat to the Magic Academy, so right now those plans are becoming increasingly smaller. Is that a good or bad thing?" Gilgamesh lay back against the enormous root of the ancient tree and closed his eyes. "Can you see the future?" This sudden question made Gilgamesh feel a bit curious, but he nodded nonetheless and said, "The past and the future, that was the reason I could remember you when I fully regained the memories of my previous life in this one. Then tell me. Roxy, taking a bold move, straddled Gilgamesh's body and asked him, what will happen to us? Do you want an answer to something I've never looked at? The silence made the surroundings feel even more serene, so Gilgamesh took Roxy by the waist and turned her over against the ground. When he was now above Roxy, he asked her again, don't you want to find out for yourself? That's not what I asked. Feeling the heat of their bodies increasing, Roxy, with glassy eyes, felt strange and held Gilgamesh's cheek while caressing that wicked face. This time will be different from the last time, so I suppose you've made a decision. Gilgamesh was now gazing at Roxy with a burning intensity that melted her heart. Under the gaze of Gilgamesh, Roxy felt her skin tingle. Gilgamesh took a step closer to Roxy, his hand reaching out to tenderly caress her cheek. His fingers traced her skin like a delicate caress, and she sighed at his touch. The attraction that could arise at any moment had now taken hold, and both were willing to consume each other. Gilgamesh's lips sought Roxy's with unbridled passion, and when they finally met, a torrent of emotions swept over them. The kiss was a rush of electric sensations, a dance of tongues and souls entwined in a passionate embrace. Roxy let out a soft moan, her body trembling under Gilgamesh's touch. Their hands slid over each other's bodies, exploring every inch of skin as if they were discovering a hidden treasure. Clothing fell to the ground in a silent whisper, revealing the naked beauty of both. That night, they both surrendered to each other, something very different from what had happened the last time. A new sensation for both. Chapter 152, Plans and Future. The next day, Roxy opened her eyes, and her tired body tormented her with all those memories from the night before. Her dazed face, still sleepy, immediately turned red, and she murmured, I must have been crazy, how could I have done all those things? When she stepped out of the tent, many more figures than there should have been were unloading huge crates from flying ships, and just as she was about to walk to find out what was going on, a voice reached her ears, My Lady Roxy, my name is Medusa, and I'm here to take you to Lord Gilgamesh. Where is he? Roxy didn't quite understand what was happening, but based on their conversation yesterday, these must be the people who would clean up this place and rebuild it. Medusa smiled and said, he is planning everything so that the structures in this place do not conflict with nature. The interior around the ancient tree will be modern and beautiful so that many can train here peacefully. He even requested something special for Gilgamesh just a few moments ago. What will be done here? Roxy was very excited and recalled the conversations she had with Gilgamesh. She had sensed that he wanted to create a kind of mansion separated from the others to live in from time to time, similar to the castle that was under construction in Ctto, albeit a bit less luxurious. As they approached the main camp, Roxy couldn't help but think that this is a good place to live. She also thought about Gilgamesh's proposal for her village to move to this place. It's not a bad option, but there's still a possibility that everyone might refuse to move. I want this area to be close to the training grounds, and I want several mage towers at these designated points. Gilgamesh said as he looked at the newly formed map. So, what do we do with the wild beasts? Simon, who stood in front of Gilgamesh, now looked more like a proper subordinate of the prince. Gilgamesh, about to respond, looked at Roxy and signaled for her to come closer. She, who was at the entrance, walked over and saw a massive map created from the divided areas of this place. The wild beasts don't enter the green zones for some reason, but I want you to use the soldiers to train while eliminating the enemy. Everything they kill must be brought back for consumption. We'll need tons of meat to feed the new recruits. Gilgamesh, who had made a decision, was sure that this was the best option. So, what about food? A man beside Simon said, we can plant fruit trees and large food crops. This place is very fertile, so there should be no problem with food. We'll use a system to create comfortable bathrooms with automatic drainage, fertile areas for planting, and special areas where buildings for resting will be constructed. So that's settled. How is the situation in Ctto? Gilgamesh was somewhat curious as he had been in this place for over a week without leaving, so he wanted to hear at least some good news. The place is under reconstruction as planned following the mass civilian evacuation. Due to the well-executed plans and your intervention that halted half of the destruction that would have occurred, only a few 100,000 people were teleported out. Search plans were initiated, and all the realms we contacted said they would do their best, but made no promises. Simon formulated a good response in just a few moments. Simon smiled a little and said, the doves have discovered that none of the realms are actually doing anything to help the affected, Many slavers are capturing the innocent, and all we can do is buy those people and bring them back to Ctto's. Eris, who had been listening to all of this, had received a letter from her parents, and after reading it, she said with a cold expression, then those realms must pay with blood for the actions of their leaders. Is anyone so inhumane as not to help in a situation where everyone could be victims? Simon looked at Eris, who had grown more than normal, just like Gilgamesh, and said, it's not that simple, my lady. Before that, my lord must become a king and marry his wives. By then, we will have control over the Azura Kingdom regions, and we will have rebuilt the city defenses. We can go directly to the realms and cut off the heads of their rulers. Regular soldiers don't have to bleed in vain. We are not their enemies but their inept rulers. Eris had much more knowledge of nobility than many others, so her words were born from her own knowledge. Gilgamesh thought that would be much better than starting wars and said, indeed, by exterminating the royalty, we could rule the realms, but we still need the help of many captains to take new regions and dislodge the capital of the realm we conquer. Roxy, who hadn't participated in the conversation, walked and sat beside Eris. Her gaze turned to the map, and she said, isn't it too hasty? Taking the realms is easy for someone like us. The first thing to do is stabilize the Azura Kingdom and start an invasion to liberate the other realms. In ancient times, the central continent belonged only to humans, so there should be no problem with them reuniting under the leadership of an emperor. That's correct, we must wait until the right time. For now, we must tarnish the reputations of those realms and make their people furious about their lack of goodness. Eris nodded as she embraced Roxy and said, you smell like flowers. Gilgamesh, who was discussing some other matters, finally said, for now, we will evacuate dwarf and elf villages to this land, assist in the reconstruction, and make this place a secret trading point. The distribution of items that leave this place will be sent to Azura for sale and distribution. Understood, sir. Then, let's get to work. Chapter 153, Changes in Ctto's. Eris, what's your decision then? Gilgamesh asked if she wanted to leave this place and go back home or if she wanted to stay and return when he did. She seemed to think for a moment and said, how long would you be gone? Maybe a year or a bit more. Gilgamesh didn't have a set time frame for when he would return, so he gave a somewhat vague response. Eris smiled and said directly, I'd like to accompany you. After all, Ctto's is still under reconstruction, so my parents asked me to have fun. Roxy, next to her, said, I need to check something at the Ctto's border when we leave this place, so before heading to the Demon Continent, I'd like to visit that place. Eris nodded without much interest and then said, we should also set up sword training, you should learn a few moves for that sword on your magical staff. Roxy looked at the sword floating around her staff, held by a delicate loop. This sword was extremely powerful and gave her the ability to excel in both swordplay and magic, two disciplines in one would be something quite interesting to see. But this would be in Roxy's hands, and how she found her fighting style would ultimately matter. Are you looking for something specific at the Ctto's border? Gilgamesh asked as he took out delicious fruits from his gate of Babylon and started cutting them to share. With a weak smile in response to that question, Roxy nodded, after traveling for some time after leaving ours, I was hired by a family who wanted me to teach magic to their 3-year-old son. His talent was good, so I was able to finish his studies before he turned 6, and after that, I traveled the world before arriving. Eris and Gilgamesh knew that Roxy was an adventurer who had resumed her work on some good missions after leaving the Azura Kingdom, so it was normal for her to have traveled the world. So, you're looking for your disciple. Although I could have evacuated everyone in ours, there were many more things involved than just saving them all. Gilgamesh pushed a plate of exotic-colored fruits towards Eris and Roxy. After that, he sighed and began to explain, the explosion that teleported people was an inevitable anomaly, but it could have been prevented with my calculations and good labor. If I suddenly forcibly took everyone to the shelter, what would they think? In that case, they might see you as a hero or as someone crazy who's forcing them to do something they don't want to do. Roxy took a bite of the exotic fruit and savored its flavor. There was no possibility of saving them all, and you did your best in that situation, so no one can fault you for it. Eris, with her mouth full of fruit, said, if you think about it, you saved many from certain death, so hundreds of thousands owe their lives to you. Everyone else might think it was a coincidence they were on the boat, but those from Ctto's will know perfectly well that you did it to save them. They'll be grateful enough not to think strange things. Gilgamesh agreed with their words, but he still knew that he had manipulated this explosion to create a highly secure capital according to his preferences where he would rule the central continent. This realm would be equipped with futuristic defense and distribution, ready for trade alongside its powerful defense. He had slowly enjoyed the rural sites of Ctto, so he decided to take that place to form the new capital of the kingdom. Things with his reign must change the laws and the way of seeing life. Everyone will learn to see life with new eyes, and finally the slavery that had been present also in their past life would be forgotten in this place. So, when are we going to sleep together? Eris's very regretful question made even the serene Gilgamesh almost choke on the fruit. Then he grunted a little and said, "How old were you? Even though you have the body of a 17-year-old woman, there is no reason to rush things." Roxy stood aside like fruit in silence while her face turned red, and she said, "I don't care about age. Have you heard it?" She asked Eris with a sly smile, then pointed out, "My mother told me about sex, I'm sure she would be good at it." Gilgamesh closed his eyes as if no comment affected him and said, "I don't care either, but I respect the mental age is greater and we can leave those things for the future." Eris stood up from the chair and said, "Then let's train. You should know that I will defeat you somehow, in bed or in a sword duel." "Are you sure she's 3? Roxy walked out behind Eris as she asked that question. "I don't know, but she's been getting more direct these past few months," Gilgamesh muttered as he walked out after his 2 future wives. He no longer had anything to hide from the 2 of them, so if they remain by his side voluntarily it is because their charms are still sitting in order. Although deep in his conscience Gilgamesh knew that he could not let go of those 2 extraordinary wives, they are both his equal and it was something he had seen since he met them. Upon leaving the cabin, Gilgamesh supervised the sword training between Eris and Roxy. From what he saw in that hour of confrontation, both had adapted to offer the most with which the other would improve. Although Roxy can't do that with Eris, at least she was serving a lot for Eris to improve her combat style. When Roxy underwent a blood ritual, her strength was far superior to that of any adult man, and she was sure that if everything went as well as now, Roxy could become a queen of the sword, while Eris would stabilize the power. Like a sword emperor. As for magic, Roxy could now use the same level of god magic due to her large mana reserves and all the qualities of her that enhanced her strength in combat. Chapter 154, Everything Changes. Unexpectedly, Roxy did have a talent for the sword, and Eris herself mentioned this. When they finished their training, Roxy felt happy that her progress was significant in each session. She herself had said that she had never been interested in swordsmanship due to her petite frame, even though her teacher at the time had told her she was suitable for magic. But now, seeing her results, she was sure she wasn't so bad. Eris told her that she had learned magic, but her results weren't as good as using spells in combat. Although she had never been enthusiastic about magic, she shared that it was fun to see things come out of a wand and hurl them at the enemy. For that reason, Gilgamesh said she could learn a bit of magic, although he considered learning it unnecessary since he could perform a spell just by watching it, like his adversaries. Magic within his body was immensely vast, and he somehow became interested in healing magic, one of the most complicated forms of magic. Haha, what I mean is that if someone were to learn the secrets of healing magic, they could even regenerate their body and become much younger. After all, the soul doesn't age, only the body does. We should keep that in mind. Gilgamesh, sitting on a massive branch of an ancient tree, gazed at the beautiful landscape and shared this with his beloved fiancés. While discussing a simple topic, Eris lay in Roxy's lap and said, "So, could a human become immortal? The secrets of healing magic have never been mastered by humans, at least, it's one of the most complex forms of magic that takes a long time to learn." Roxy shook her head and said, "There might be that possibility, but we'd be talking about speculations." Roxy was the one who could speak the most about magic, as she had even attended the Magic Academy and was an emperor-ranked mage. Only someone like her could utter those words without Gilgamesh contradicting them with solid knowledge. After all, magic is more than just words, it's something he doesn't like to comprehend. Not to mention, it's a very complex doctrine to learn on your own without a highly powerful teacher to guide you. Therefore, if Roxy can now use class god magic, it would only be by her own merits and the fact that she's putting in enough effort to achieve it. Not everyone has the desire to continue advancing in power, and that's something that is frequently mentioned in slave training, so for those people, all you have to do is tighten the leash a bit. So, what do you think about immortality? Eris posed a rather special question for Gilgamesh, who had once sought immortality all over the world. Roxy was the first to respond, "For me, it would be nothing more than living more years. Since I belong to a demon race that lives as long as the elves, I can't accurately understand the complexity of that question." Eris smiled and said, Perhaps it would be boring if you didn't live with those you love. Being immortal and alone wouldn't be desirable at all. I guess that's how I see it. What do you think? Do you want to live more years? Gilgamesh asked in a much more serious tone. I have in my possession a fruit that grants immortality to those who consume it, but it's not as easy as that. It requires a rigorous elixir that only I know how to prepare. Do you want us to drink that at our wedding and potentially live for thousands of years more? Eris jumped in surprise and asked, is that possible? I still don't know if it will work, but even if we don't become immortal, we could still live thousands of extra years in this world. I was never particularly drawn to living for so long, but as you say, if we're together, maybe it's worth a shot. Gilgamesh pondered for a moment and added, besides, our descendants would have the ability to live longer. I have no problem with that. If I'm older, we could explore all the corners of the world with much more peace of mind and without any problems. Eris became excited at the idea and nodded. Roxy appeared happy and said, as long as we live and die at similar ages, that would be the best. No one likes to die alone. Then I'll prepare the elixir. Gilgamesh, who was also seeking a different kind of life, thought this would be an interesting way to search for the human god. A few months later, construction in the place now called the Hidden Paradise was progressing at an impressive speed. This was due to the dwarves handling the construction, while others assisted with the materials. The mages facilitated the work with magic, and in just a few months, there was a beautiful place suitable for 20,000 people. Although construction continued, it was much slower because it required greater delicacy and involved different structures, including restaurants, entertainment areas, and parks integrated with nature. The people who had been trapped here were eventually saved by Gilgamesh's people, and the vast majority ended up joining the Tower of Uruk. They all wanted to become stronger, and the only way to do that was by serving Prince Gilgamesh. There were all kinds of people in the Hidden Paradise, living in harmony with clear goals. However, even though they lived well, Gilgamesh didn't want to compromise the safety of everyone and placed night guards to keep the streets secure. Evil is something inherent and unique to living beings. Everyone has their problems, but very few realize that most of them can be resolved through communication. It's difficult to understand this when you're aggressive, intoxicated, or simply misinterpreted things. That's why there are situations where those affected resolve their issues on the battlefield, engaging in fair combat, fist to fist. Most end up becoming enemies, while others come to understand their differences. If the problem persists, mandatory work assignments are imposed where they have to work together to clean streets, build houses, or farm. If the issue still can't be resolved, both parties causing disruptions are placed in a dangerous situation where only together can they survive. The most amusing approach is to throw both sides onto a wide platform where the only way to ascend is by supporting each other. Studies have shown that by the end of the day, they end up becoming friends or simply stop bothering each other. But in some cases, even to maintain peace in the surroundings, these people are separated by zones where they won't have to see each other frequently. This approach has worked perfectly in Ars and many other towns protected by Gilgamesh's people. Isn't this trial beautiful? Gilgamesh asked while looking at the slowly forming civilization in the Hidden Paradise. The problem lies with some demons, they don't have many capabilities for living alongside humans. Although I know there are no plans to encroach on the demon continent, it's still strange to see them coexist with humans. Simon isn't someone who rejects demonic races. In fact, he has a lot of respect for Gilgamesh's new wife, Roxy. However, what he means is that it's a very challenging combination. It might be acceptable for people of the beast race, but demons have extremely intimidating bodies that can potentially cause problems in the way humans, elves, beastmen, and dwarves live. It's not about rejecting that race, but he still finds it difficult to understand the outcome of a united civilization. I understand that as well. It won't be a problem since I won't touch the demon continent. This is currently an exception, but it won't continue in the future. With that said, Gilgamesh decided to go for a walk. Chapter 155, A Sealed Place. Come for the specialty of the demon continent, our barbecue has an intense flavor you won't be able to resist. A massive demon with a bull's body was preparing barbecue for his restaurant after abandoning his mercenary desires. What are you looking at? If you don't like it, I won't charge you a thing. The bull-bodied demon shouted again. The economy in this place is solely managed with silver and gold coins, there is no such thing as copper, so only those two types of coins are in circulation. A new coin made of black metal will be introduced later, but it's still in production, and the logistics team is carefully handling the delicate process of introducing this final coin. These gold coins bear the face of Gilgamesh and were the same coins that circulated in his former kingdom. Since this place is now part of his realm, there is no problem using these coins to establish an economy here. In the following weeks, many people became interested in creating their own businesses, and with Gilgamesh's assistance, they could establish themselves to make a living. Several shops were created where people could spend their money. The most remarkable shops were the ones belonging to Uruk, known for their unforgettable colosseums and delicious food. As he walked the expanding city's streets in simple clothing, Gilgamesh also opened a colosseum where warriors could fight for significant rewards in the future. And the best part was that it would be a special place where many could earn money. In his past life, the colosseum was one of his favorite places due to the fierce clashes that could occur, and in this place, it was no exception. Wherever he ruled, there had to be an active colosseum where interesting events could take place. In addition to these trivial matters, a spatial boundary was established where people couldn't venture further if their goal was to avoid being killed by a wild beast. While precautions were taken by sending armies to confront and eliminate wild beasts, it remained an extremely safe place. Have you decided what to play? One of the children gathered in the park asked the others, who were watching a caterpillar munch on a green leaf. Isn't that incredible? That caterpillar, of course, is aware of our presence, but it's just doing what it wants, following its instincts. A young elf, looking concerned, said, "Don't you think it's scared?" "Of course not, if it were frightened by our presence, that caterpillar would have stopped eating." A young beast child smiled and said, "My dad told me that every animal has an instinct, even humans, so the caterpillar's instinct when facing a threat is to keep eating. I laugh when I'm scared." "Ha ha ha. That's the funniest thing I've heard in a long time." "What's so funny?" At that moment, a calm voice was heard behind the children, and when they all saw who it was, they shouted in amazement, "Gilgamesh! What are you doing here?" "Well, I decided to go for a walk and found you all looking a bit mysterious." Gilgamesh raised an eyebrow and said, "You can tell me, I'm a big man who keeps secrets." "It's not very interesting, Your Highness." Gilgamesh wondered if these children were afraid of him. To lighten the situation in the little heads of these children, Gilgamesh said, "Well, I'll perform a magic trick." "Oh!" The children lined up and watched Gilgamesh, who seemed to be moving his hands in front of them. He appeared very serious, so they all remained silent. "My mom says powerful mages are old," a young elf girl whispered while squinting at Gilgamesh. "Is His Highness Gilgamesh old?" a clumsy boy asked openly, but his friends covered his mouth before he could finish the sentence. Gilgamesh, still smiling, furrowed his brow a bit. These kids these days were sharper than expected. So, after a bit more hand movement, a box of chocolates appeared in front of all the children. Ah! Are those sweets? My mom says they are very expensive. My father likes bitter chocolate, I don't. Come on, take a chocolate, this is my gift." Gilgamesh opened the delicate box containing his precious chocolates. He had only about 5,000 boxes of these delicacies, and these brats who called him old would have one. A frightened-looking boy said, "Can we really have one? My mom told me not to accept things from strangers." Gilgamesh was on the verge of collapsing when a soft hand waved his head. He was about to get angry when suddenly Eris entered his field of vision, and further back was Roxy, both wearing combat outfits with bloodstains on their clothes. "Are you coming from training?" Gilgamesh asked as he looked at both women. Roxy nodded and said, "I thought you didn't like children, but it seems they are afraid of you." "Haha, have they seen you angry?" "No, not at all." Gilgamesh muttered, recalling how he had once arrived in the village with his body covered in blood. The children had seen him like that, so that might be the reason. Do you want children?" "How many?" Eris asked as she took a chocolate and ate it. "Oh, the beautiful lady will eat them all, take yours and run." One boy stepped forward and took a chocolate before running off. His action triggered all the children to take their chocolates and run. "Is that a compliment or an insult?" Eris asked, equally bewildered as Gilgamesh. "A compliment, eating is a good thing." Roxy, who was suppressing her laughter, looked at Eris and Gilgamesh, who had lost their patience with the children. "Well, don't you want to take a bath together?" Gilgamesh asked with a mischievous look. "No problem." Eris responded immediately, but Roxy intervened and said, "Of course, but you'll wear a bathing suit." "That wouldn't be a bath," Gilgamesh argued as he walked back to his mansion atop the ancient tree. That's not up for discussion. Roxy had to protect Eris from Gilgamesh's advances. That man in a state of drunkenness spared absolutely nothing. Chapter 156, In a New Place. Lift your waist a bit more, grip your sword tighter, and focus on using teleportation magic more effectively, combining your long-range magic with close combat. Gilgamesh was observing the battle between Eris and Roxy, who were absolutely brutal in their every move. At this rate, they would become as powerful as the named gods of this world, something truly worthy of admiration for him. After all, not many are willing to become so strong just because. But deep down, Gilgamesh knows that this is due to his presence. Knowing how strong he is, they should feel pressured to be of some help in a dangerous situation. And as they are aware of the god he wants to defeat, they know perfectly well that they only need strength to achieve everything in this world. Gilgamesh was very aware of this, and the only way to solve it is to train his women. They must be unreachable and incredibly powerful goddesses so that no evil in this world can harm them. Children, friends, and acquaintances all feel the pressure of having someone extraordinary by their side, but knowing the source of the problem is the first step to addressing it. Eris, improve the speed of your feet and flow with your battle instinct. You've been getting better by training with powerful opponents, so have more confidence in yourself. Boom! Eris, who used a special sword movement, appeared near Roxy, wearing armor that covered most of her body. Along with her sword, she was as dazzling as a valkyrie. As she moved her sword, the ground sank hundreds of meters around, creating a massive crater that expanded along with a shockwave. However, Roxy, who had been learning teleportation magic, used her spell to disappear and reappear a kilometer away. She was dressed in a blue outfit with a lack of armor, her characteristic mage hat, and an upper garment that covered from her sleeves to her shoulders. These armors they wore were extremely special, as they once belonged to extremely powerful women who died at the hands of Gilgamesh in the last war against the gods. Emerging water. Boom! 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 Having established a significantly advantageous distance, Roxy didn't hesitate and used spells to damage the ground in front of her, making it difficult for Eris to advance. After that, raising her staff, magic flowed, and she attacked with fiery waves. Burning Fury. Boom! Eris, who was advancing at an unimaginable speed, even for an Emperor of the Sword, had some difficulties moving forward due to the damaged ground. Sensing the distant heat, she frowned, and her sword erupted in powerful flames. Using her noble phantasm, Eris counterattacked with the powerful flames bursting from her sword, and a massive wave of fire immediately engulfed the surroundings, causing the already damaged area to ignite. However, at that very moment, ice attacks came like powerful spears. Eris, who wanted a sword fight, was overwhelmed by the sheer number of spells Roxy was whispering in seconds. In normal circumstances, she would have already lost, but she managed to hold her ground thanks to her sword and armor. This is cheating, you said you wouldn't abuse magic. Eris thought with growing anger. Then, after establishing a distant distance on the damaged ground, she charged forward, and her speed increased as a golden aura surrounded her body. Boom! As she soared through the sky, she felt traces of electric currents heading toward her body, so she used a defensive move in the style of the Golden Lion. At that moment, a golden aura enveloped her body, and a powerful pressure even caused the clouds in the sky to part. Too much to control. Roxy changed her strategy and began to concentrate a powerful attack, forming large water whales that danced around her. Boom! After launching, Roxy used an electric spell, and the whales heading towards Eris suffered an electric boost, turning into a brutal attack in an instant. It's not enough. Attacking from a considerable height, Eris swung her sword towards Roxy, and a long-range attack wave was about to impact her body when she disappeared. In that moment, Eris, who was still in the air, searched for the target. I've got you! Upon finding Roxy, Eris flashed with a powerful battle aura and impacted the ground. The surroundings were destroyed, and at that moment, Gilgamesh, who had not moved since the battle began, took a moment to stop it. This is enough for today. Interrupted by Gilgamesh, both of them, who were sweating, fell silent. Roxy's white hair began to return to its natural state along with her blue lines, while Eris's battle aura disappeared from the surroundings. Eris, exhausted by the pressure Roxy had exerted during the battle, asked, "Did we go too far with the strength we were using?" Roxy looked around and said in a somewhat flat tone, "I think we did, but our clashes are becoming more impressive and intense." Gilgamesh smiled as he handed each of them a water bottle and said, "In the meantime, Eris, you need to calculate the battle minutes after making a move. You focus too much on the moment and not on what will happen afterward. If you improve in that aspect, you'll never feel overwhelmed in battle. I will do that! Eris exclaimed, filled with excitement, knowing that her strength was still increasing to the point where even Gilgamesh could only mention a few small aspects for her to improve. After talking to Eris, Gilgamesh turned to Roxy and said, "You need to apply more feints and set up a unique battle spell system in tiers. This means classifying combinations of spells from weaker to stronger to gauge your opponent before going all out with more powerful combinations." Roxy had adapted to both melee combat and magic, two completely different styles combined into one. It still felt strange for her to engage in melee combat against Eris, knowing that Eris excelled in swordplay. However, when she combined that style with magic, the result was very satisfying. "Get ready, we will go to the Ctto border today before heading to the Demon Continent," Gilgamesh said as he allowed them to rest and left to attend to something important. "Have you heard any rumors in the neighboring realms?" Gilgamesh asked as he took a seat in a large room. Simon, seated in front of him, replied, "It's still strange, but for some reason, I feel that attention is being directed towards the Azura Kingdom, and I can't understand why. Do you think there's a possibility that this human god might try to manipulate the monarchs to make me appear as a public enemy? I've thought about that for a long time, but I don't see the point." Gilgamesh calmly sipped a glass of wine and shared some of his thoughts. Simon nodded in understanding and said, "It won't matter much as long as we don't strike first, we'll have the support of the civilians, and with that, we'll win the war. What about the apostles? We're looking for the god of combat, the demon queen, but we haven't found any leads yet. It would be much easier to locate the dragon god, who has recently been seen with a girl." Simon shared this information, which had not yet been fully processed. "A human girl?" Gilgamesh this time felt curious. "Yes, they seem to be traveling, but like pigeons, they have a strange sensation of terror when they get near the dragon god. Only sword emperors can stand firm in front of him. Perhaps it's some kind of curse. Perhaps it is." Chapter 157, Do you still not remember? Far and near at the same time. Do you still not know who Gilgamesh really is? It may not be relevant to some people, but even in your world, he was a king who ruled at some point. Should I know who Gilgamesh is in my world? A voice asked in response to that tired voice that kept appearing in his dreams. You should know him. Gilgamesh was a historical figure who sought immortality for a long time and ended up dying like any other human who couldn't adapt to life. He's known in your world as the King of Uruk. Do you remember now? Why should I care about him, Hitagami? Without understanding the reason, that voice continued to question the annoying presence of that being in his dreams. Have you forgotten what I told you the first time we met? Gilgamesh is taking everything that originally belongs to you. You know perfectly well that if it weren't for his presence, you could have had a different destiny with the girl Grere. Now, I'll tell you a secret, and that same boy your teacher Roxy was talking about is none other than Gilgamesh, who was her first disciple and with whom she may end up marrying. Eh? How is that possible? Gilgamesh is supposed to not know magic. How could he be a student of my teacher Roxy? Rudius, Gilgamesh is a huge danger to the world, and his existence is a threat to both you and the world. That man is a time bomb that will trigger one of the most infernal wars that humanity has ever known in its lifetime. Hitagami looked at Rudius, who was in front of him, and warned, he knows you come from another world, he has seen your past and your future. Rudius frowned and asked, so, shouldn't he know that I'll contact you and if I'll ever be his enemy in the future? No, he can't see that because until before this conversation, you wouldn't have had the intention to kill him. What I mean is that as long as he's your ally, there are many things that this man named Gilgamesh won't be able to do to you. Hitagami seemed much more serious than usual when he said those words, giving Rudius a sense of urgency. Is that how the future works? Rudius couldn't immediately understand what was happening, but to be honest, he had no intention of killing Gilgamesh. Hitagami seemed to notice that, so with a much colder voice, he said, will you let Gilgamesh do as he pleases after causing that mana disaster that sent you to this deadly place? He caused it? Rudius asked, genuinely surprised. He couldn't imagine that for a second, and he couldn't believe it. He could have prevented it from happening, but instead, he used that disaster to benefit himself and build his own empire. Isn't that selfish enough? Hundreds of thousands could die, even your family. Aren't you angry? Gilgamesh stole your friend Sylphie because he knew perfectly well that she could be a nuisance, so he's using her to hurt you. Aren't you angry yet? He did all of that. Stunned, Rudius thought about a logical way to avoid any confrontation with Gilgamesh, but he couldn't find one. Now that he thought about it, that person had been interfering in a new life over and over again without rest. How dare he use Sylphie when I swore not to touch Eris? That damn evil being, how can he play with people's lives like that? Everything he had discovered was ridiculous, but there was nothing more he could do to prevent someone like Gilgamesh from causing problems that would affect the entire world. Yes, perhaps that's why he came to this place in the first place. I won't be able to defeat him unless I become stronger. Do you have a plan for that? Rudius asked with a cold look. Of course, I will help you forge a good armor, and even better, you will have very powerful allies. Hitagama seemed delighted to know that Rudius would focus on Gilgamesh, as it would allow him to kill two birds with one stone when the time came. Boreas Mansion in Ars. Do you know who killed my father and the other elders of the family? Luke Notos Grere looked at his uncle sitting in the family leader's main room and asked with a somber expression. Shouldn't you be with the princess? Philip gave his nephew a calm look, after setting aside the documents in his hands. How can I protect the family if I don't know who killed my father and slaughtered our family members? Luke asked again, furious about the situation. Philip took off his glasses and said in a cold tone, they only massacred the older members, and that was due to the internal struggles of the prince's factions. Our Notos family has supported Prince Jebel and the Grere Princess Ariel for a long time, but now we have decided to support Prince Gilgamesh, who will be my daughter's future husband. Considering that, I would say you shouldn't support Ariel anymore, but since Gilgamesh values her like a sister, you should be by her side and support her. Are you saying that my father's death is related to royal battles? Luke calmed down after hearing those words, but he still maintained his composure and asked in a calm tone. Darius Silvaganius subordinates, the deceased Prime Minister of the kingdom. You may not have known this, but the Notos family and the Prime Minister supported Prince Jebel, while the Grere family supported Princess Ariel. When the Prime Minister died, his loyal subordinates thought that the Notos had betrayed Jebel's allied faction to support Ariel, and that's why they launched a direct attack on our family. Philip answered Luke with a shrewd look as Luke remained silent. Were they captured? Luke asked this in a cold tone. Some are in prison. You can go and kill them if that makes you feel better. Recover and take care of your brothers, your mother is still alive. Philip stood up and hugged his foolish nephew. Thank you, uncle. Luke, who left the room, seemed much better knowing that the culprits behind his family's death were dead or in prison. Do you think you have control, my lord? A voice was heard in the darkness, and a figure knelt before Philip. Philip nodded and said, that boy is an idiot who only thinks about women. He's not as perceptive as you think. Chapter 158, The Sea. My lord, what do you think of this number of named knights? 10,000 sword kings, 40,000 sword saints. The numbers are terrifying, but there's nothing better than your personal army. Alastor, who had now achieved his dream of being a sword god, looked with pride as these thousands of people trained in an orderly fashion. Gilgamesh looked at this army and nodded with some satisfaction. It's a good job. I'm surprised that there are so many sword kings. As for the sword saints, they are mere errors who couldn't go further due to their limited desires. That's not surprising, they were wanderers when we took them into our forces. Most of them were sick when the slavers sold them, so what we've achieved in such a short time is admirable, if I may say so. Alastor was proud of this army. What about the others? Gilgamesh, who wanted to know about the state of his people, asked about the other legions of soldiers, and especially wanted to know about the mages. Not only the Purple Horse family was training their warriors, the other families that had sworn loyalty to him should be training their troops as well. Alastor thought for a moment and said, what we have in front of us is a quarter of our army. As you ordered, we divided the soldiers into 4 special points where the 4 families that have sworn loyalty to you will be the swords executing the traitors of the Azura kingdom. If we do the calculations, we have 140,000 sword saints, 40,000 sword kings, all divided into very special zones. If we count the sword emperors, we have only 5,000 of them, and sword gods, there are no more than 1,000. According to your instructions, we have made it clear that the main objective is to obtain this army, so each of us is ready to unify the central continent. After saying that, Alastor adjusted his glasses and pointed out, as for the mages, we have 120,000 apprentices who are in their initial practices within mage towers distributed in different parts of the kingdom. In addition to that, mages capable of casting holy rank magic number 40,000, for king rank magic we only have 20,000, and for emperor rank, there are only 8,000 mages. As for god rank magic, we only have 1,000 mages and a little more. In reserve, we have around 1 million slaves who were taken from noble families, bought, and saved from sects that worship non-existent gods. An army of 500,000 powerful elite soldiers, can anyone stop them? Gilgamesh took a sip of his favorite wine and said, we must stop at 700,000 elite soldiers, we won't spend more resources to strengthen others. You have to consider that they are 700,000 sharp swords. Alastor understood what Gilgamesh meant and said, it's a pity that hundreds have died due to treason, your method for maintaining order in the army is highly effective, and they all remain calm. They all await your orders to act. Do you think they label me as the bloody monarch? I will kill kings, princes, entire royal families, and conquer the central kingdoms. Gilgamesh could take all the continents if he wanted, but for now, he focused on gaining control of the central continent and fortifying it as much as possible. Your war, my lord, I can see it very well. If you were a ruler and I were to ask for help to save my young grandson, I am sure that you would extend a hand to save his life. Alastor's voice broke a bit at the end of these words, but his face exuded coldness, and he said, if you become a monarch, the changes will be more than enough to teach us to live differently. You remind me a bit of my best friend. He lived and died encouraging my decisions no matter how absurd they seemed at the time. I can only say that many have considered me better since I started living in a different way, so I'm sure it will be worth it. When Gilgamesh said these words, he felt a bit relieved and went to ponder many things that he still needed to consider seriously. Alastor remained silent, watching as the troops trained and the towering buildings rose higher and higher, turning this desolate place into an incredibly beautiful city. From the center of the immense sea, a dreamlike landscape unfolds for anyone flying from a considerable height, where magic and wonder converge in a symphony of colors and sounds. Crystal clear waters stretch as far as the eye can see, reflecting the intense blue of the sky merging with the horizon. The radiant and generous sun paints golden glimmers on the water's surface, creating a path of lights that seems to lead to infinity. In this magical place, the most astonishing sea creatures emerge from the depths, displaying their majestic bodies and dazzling colors. Gigantic whales gracefully dance on the surface, defying gravity with impressive leaps. Their resonant songs fill the air, creating a symphony that seems to emanate from the waves themselves. High above, a golden spot traveled at great speed over the immense sea while 3 figures sat in a long lounge chair with enough space for all of them. As they explored this aquatic paradise, they found themselves surrounded by magical beings and wondrous creatures that defy the imagination. Sea serpents with iridescent scales glide alongside luminous dolphins that leave a trail of colorful wakes in their path. High above, exotic and extraordinary birds soar through the sky in sinuous flights. Their dazzling plumage appears to be made of gems and precious metals, and their melodious songs fill the air with celestial music. These unique, otherworldly birds create a spectacle of color and sound that rivals any dream. I never thought that one day we would leave the hidden paradise. Surely the rumors about the collapse have spread across all continents, and many will lose interest. Eris gazed at the vast sea as she expressed her thoughts. It has been a long time, and I never thought that the sea, which was so dangerous, would be so beautiful from the heights. There is much more life out here than we thought. Roxy, as an adventurer, had heard rumors about the sea, and it was common for ships to be sunk by magical creatures. But now, seeing it from above, there was nothing more incredible than this. Gilgamesh smiled and said, if the magical ship systems work, all continents will hire the services of my company, and the money would be enormous. No one would travel by sea if they could go flying. Well, let's head to the Ctto border, as Roxy wants to check on her student. Taking that course, Gilgamesh accelerated at an impressive speed to ensure they wouldn't be delayed much in that place. Chapter 159, Just Trust Me. The disaster is still extensive. Half a year had passed since Gilgamesh, along with Eris and Roxy, entered the hidden paradise. After a rather short journey, they arrived in Ctto, and they all gazed at the surrounding meadows. Gilgamesh could tell just by looking that they were amazed. At this moment, they were on the main road that runs through the Azura kingdom, paved with stones, a cobblestone road that extended from one end to the other of the kingdom's territory. It seems that even the current king is so inept as not to rebuild this road. Gilgamesh suddenly scorned his father's actions as king. How could he not rebuild something as basic as a stone road? If other kingdoms were smart, they would know that the Azura kingdom is less than what the rumors say. I never imagined that this type of damage had spread throughout the region. Eris, who wore her long hair, was pleasantly surprised by what she was seeing. Roxy knew that there used to be something in this place. She had heard from Gilgamesh that there was a mana explosion that he successfully tried to prevent, saving 85% of the population in the region. However, half of it was completely destroyed by that disaster. Are you worried about your disciple? Gilgamesh asked as he looked at the silent Roxy. He now knew that Rudius was her student, and it was incredibly curious how their paths with that Moggerel intersected with his. They have all disappeared. Roxy murmured in a slow tone while listening to various rumors in the vicinity. Did you also lose a family member? An elderly voice from a carriage stopped behind Gilgamesh's group. I lost a good disciple. So, a student, being a mage yourself, your student should also be one. If that's the case, you should have accepted long ago that they could lose their life at any moment, don't you think? He was only 10 years old. That is certainly far too premature. The driver got out of the carriage and walked toward them. He looked at the destroyed area and said, but you should not be sad. Prince Gilgamesh is doing his utmost to bring back all those affected, even if they are on the demon continent. He was the only one who acted as quickly as possible in this disaster, and thousands of people have been saved by his people. He is incredible, isn't he? Roxy looked at Gilgamesh, who was sitting under a distant tree, smiling slightly. Of course, he has spent an unimaginable fortune and has contacted many kingdoms. It is a shame that not all kingdoms show empathy in this disaster and do not help in response to Prince Gilgamesh's requests, but many are grateful for all his efforts, the carriage driver said as he looked at the golden-haired man in the distance. His eyes could not deceive him, that man was of great importance. He has to tell you that there's a camp where the most recent survivors have been gathering, rescued by Gilgamesh's Templar Knights. Although keep in mind that it's unlikely for a 10-year-old child to have survived the event, but at least there's a chance that there might be a record of whether he's alive or missing in that place. Do you really want to go and look for that Moggerel? Gilgamesh asked as he gave a calm look to Roxy, who seemed genuinely worried about Rudius. You called him a Moggerel. Eris's ears twitched as she remembered what Gilgamesh had told her about that word, so she immediately asked, did he do something to bother you? Gilgamesh shook his head and said, not yet. Roxy raised her head and said, we can go to the Milis continent and start our journey from there. Rudius and his family must be fine, especially considering how intelligent he is. They must be living happily in the refugee camp. Once again, Roxy's nobility led her to make certain decisions that even Gilgamesh accepted. After all, if you think about it, the future had not yet happened. Very well, let's go, Gilgamesh said as his Vimana descended from the sky and landed at a height where they could board. When Gilgamesh sat in the central throne of his Vimana, the elderly carriage driver looked at him for a moment and murmured, you are Prince Gilgamesh. Take care, old man, and thank you for your help. Treat yourself to a good dinner. After saying those words, Gilgamesh tossed a bag of gold coins to the old man before disappearing from his sight. The refugee camp was made up of several wooden houses, so rather than calling it a camp where survivors were accommodated, it more closely resembled the idea of a village. Although the atmosphere in the place was quite depressing. When they arrived, Gilgamesh, who wore his golden armor underneath, and the nearby knights immediately said, welcome, my lord. Rest, soldiers. What is the situation in the camp? Gilgamesh asked as he continued to walk. My lord, after taking records of the refugees and their personal data, they are sent to the underground city in Ctto to be placed on the list for city reconstruction. Your assistance is welcome, and as you ordered, they will all be rewarded with a house in good condition and a substantial amount of money to start rebuilding their lives. How far along is the reconstruction of Ctto? Eris asked casually as she walked beside Gilgamesh, wearing that full body armor, making her unmatched in beauty. Only 35% in 6 months, although we have all the land marked, we are focusing on building houses, and according to reports, the architecture used is much more modern, so it will take as long as necessary. The knight was extremely proud to have learned all this without anyone asking. What is your rank? Gilgamesh asked casually. King of the Sword in the Golden Lion style, Salazar. The knight respectfully bowed to his lord. If you work a little harder, you can become a sword emperor. After saying that, Gilgamesh and the others advanced to the bulletin board. The Azura kingdom that Roxy knew was a rich and bustling country, with a friendly and cheerful atmosphere, filled with energetic and joyful faces. Food was abundant, and magical creatures were very few, it was a place similar to paradise. But at this moment, there are no smiles in sight. It's a village where food is not scarce, you can even pick grass from the ground and eat it to avoid starving. Up until now, Roxy believed that just not having to starve to death was enough reason to smile, because even though sad things happened on this continent, unlike the demon continent, the environment wasn't as wild. Or so she thought. Because the atmosphere surrounding Roxy is quite disturbing and gloomy. In the village, there's a temporary adventurers guild, and next to the job request bulletin board, you can feel an incredible pressure and a somber atmosphere. Near the bulletin board, men who have lost their families and homes are crying and shouting. They have been waiting for their return for half a year, asking aloud without directing the question to anyone in particular why this has happened. Next to that man, a priest throws the Mealy's cross, the symbol of his faith, to the ground, having completely lost faith and hope. Further away, a merchant takes a knife to his neck, intending to cut it, although those around him manage to stop him because that man has lost something more important than his life. Even with food, this place can still be compared to hell. The atmosphere is weighing on Roxy, and on the verge of tears, she decides to gather information first. But at that moment, a golden figure heads towards the man and picks up the knife from the ground, stopping in front of everyone. "Don't cry anymore." Gilgamesh looked at the man who had tried to take his own life and said in a cold tone, "It doesn't matter if you die, but if you do, you'll be spitting in the face of all the knights who are now doing the unthinkable to find your lost family. You don't understand, I can't find my wife, and I'll never be able to face my little daughter." The man shouted, and he was released by the others and grabbed Gilgamesh by the collar. "From your expression, you don't understand pain. You don't know what I've lost, and you'll never be able to feel what I'm going through right now." Insolent. A group of knights was about to behead the man for disrespecting Prince Gilgamesh, who only a few people from Uruk knew now in his adult form. "Crying won't bring your wife back. Your pain is useless because it won't bring anyone back from the dead," Gilgamesh said, genuinely expressionless in the face of the man's outburst in front of him. Chapter 160, The Information. Everyone was surprised by the words spoken by Gilgamesh, even Eris, who was about to strike the ungrateful man but stopped when she saw Gilgamesh's expressionless gaze. Everyone has the right to cry because they are human, that is the most special way to project our pain and suffering. You should not feel sad for feeling pain, it's okay to miss those you have lost. But I won't allow you to take your own life when there are still thousands of people waiting to be rescued. My name is Gilgamesh. I personally requested cooperation from neighboring kingdoms, but they all refused, claiming that our citizens in the Azura Kingdom were impossible to save. I am furious. The inept King Azura is a decrepit old man who knows nothing but sitting on a throne with no power. So when he dies, I will ascend to the throne and be crowned as the king of all of you. I will crush with my own hands those families that have refused to take a firm step forward in this situation and cut off the heads of all those kingdoms that refused to save their families. If it serves any purpose, there are still thousands of people searching for their families, and we are doing everything we can to ensure none of them fall into the hands of slavers. At least, if they don't return to you, it means they have left that world without pain." Gilgamesh's words stirred the hearts of all present, whether they had just arrived or had been waiting for their relatives in this place for a long time. All of them fell silent, dropping to their knees and unable to hold back their tears at the sight of this man upon whom they had pinned their hopes. "Prince Gilgamesh, thank you for your help. We heard that all the children in Ctto have been saved, so we are grateful for your efforts." Gilgamesh sighed and said, "Do not be overwhelmed. After taking your records, you will know if there are loved ones who have been taken to Ctto without going through the regulations of this place. Stay strong and do not cry anymore, I will always be here to help you." After saying what he wanted to say, he walked toward a tent, followed by Eris and Roxy, who were in silence as they thought about what they had just witnessed. They knew perfectly well that Gilgamesh had a certain desire to change the course of the Azura Kingdom, and that could only be directed towards a pure love for humanity. It is more than obvious that he has lost more than loved ones, he has died for humanity. His journey in this world can be both a curse and a new beginning for him. For this reason, maybe he thought it would be something pleasant. I suppose this is my fault. If I had tried a little harder, I'm sure this wouldn't have happened. Gilgamesh didn't know the outcome if he tried to destroy that concentration of mana with all his power. That's why his best option was to use this disaster to his advantage to drive the entire kingdom toward change. Eris hugged Gilgamesh from behind and said, "You've done more than enough for all of them. Everyone knows that, so you don't need to worry if your help isn't sufficient. Just think about what would have happened if they weren't in this world, place, and moment." Roxy, who was saddened by the loss of Rudius, hugged Gilgamesh from the front and said, "I'm sorry, I can't help but worry about that student and where he is right now. It's okay to worry about the people you care about. You've always been like that, my dear Roxy." Gilgamesh embraced these two women, whom he had recently come to consider a precious treasure in this life, something he initially viewed as a mere objective that every simple human achieved in life. Cough cough cough. A strong cough was heard at the entrance of the tent, and a hoarse voice said, "My lord, I've come to report on the situation in the camp." "Very well, come in." In approximately an hour, Roxy had managed to understand more or less what had happened. Shortly after the strange phenomenon in which the sky changed color, a vast region of Ctto was affected by a massive magical catastrophe. The calamity translated into something similar to a large-scale area of effects spell, in which instead of causing a tremendous explosion, it randomly teleported all the people of Ctto around the world. Unlike the people who were teleported all over the place, the buildings and forests simply vanished. Those who managed to return home after many hardships found that the catastrophe had taken everything from them and were completely devastated. If it weren't for Gilgamesh stopping half of the magical aura and protecting half of Ctto, many more would have perished. According to her understanding, there was supposed to be a mana outbreak, but there wasn't enough manpower, and Roxy knew what would happen if all of them were forcibly moved. That's why she understood that the sacrifice Gilgamesh made is acceptable. He can't save everyone, and in this life, that job is not his responsibility. "We did not expect your visit, my lord. How has the situation been lately in the hidden paradise?" asked a man named Joe, who was a sword god. Gilgamesh tilted his head, resting his hand on Eris's shoulders, then sighed and said, "The moon elves have moved to the hidden paradise. Their presence was more than enough for all the forest elves we protect to decide to move to a safer place." "That's amazing." Although rumors have started to spread, Joe pondered for a moment and said, "If all the elves on the continents decide to enter the hidden paradise, there will be a certain chaos in the uncertainty. They'll only be concerned about where their slaves went. Do you know how many slavers the guardians of that forest have killed? Hundreds, if not thousands. But, thank you for your service in this place, and I look forward to your return to ours," Gilgamesh said as he stood up and extended his hand to this talented swordsman. Proud to be able to shake the hand of his leader, Joe nodded and said, "I will work hard to avoid any mistakes. I will return as soon as possible, my lord." "Shouldn't there be something we're looking for here?" Eris asked, somewhat puzzled. She hadn't picked up a book in a long time and preferred practicing with her sword to studying. Roxy surveyed the bulletin board. It was being used to list the deceased individuals along with another list of missing persons. Beside her, another bulletin board contained messages left by relatives with numerous similar requests like, "If you see this person during your journey, please send them to this address." An enormous number of requests. In all her years as an adventurer, she had never seen the board so full. This detail helped her understand the magnitude of what was happening, and as she understood, all these adventurers were being paid by Gilgamesh. The dead and the missing. Surely the travelers who ended up in this place would have seen or known about the missing people. Although she doubted that people paid much attention to rumors of people falling from the sky, those were hard to believe if you were unaware of the event. Roxy began searching for names on the list of deceased people, taking advantage of its shorter length. Fortunately, she didn't recognize any of the deceased from the catastrophe. However, in comparison, the number of missing people was overwhelming. Furthermore, having been teleported all over the world, it was highly likely that a large number of them had been devoured by magical creatures, leaving no bones behind. Others likely died instantly upon being teleported to mountains, at too high an altitude, or in the middle of the sea, just as Gilgamesh and Eris had been teleported. Gilgamesh, who had removed the golden armor to avoid attracting too much attention, was now wearing his regular clothing. He asked Eris, "My dear Eris, aren't you sad about the disappearance of your master, Rudius?" Eris, who knew the purpose of this question, replied, "It's true that it's regrettable, but all we can do is wish him luck and hope he survives whatever situation he's in. Though, I don't feel like worrying about it right now. I found them." Roxy frowned as she pointed to the list of missing persons. Rudius' family was listed on that paper, something even Gilgamesh hadn't expected, knowing that he had given some power to the man named Paul. Roxy, on the other hand, learned from this that Lilia had become Paul's wife. And this person named Aisha was likely one of Rudius' sisters, so there should be another one. Upon realizing that Paul and Norn were not on the list, Roxy felt a sense of relief and checked the list of the deceased once again. They were not on this list either. This implied that they were likely alive. While there could be errors in the lists, it was too soon to be hopeful. Nonetheless, I should be relieved not to have found them on the list of the deceased. Gilgamesh said with certainty, Paul is now a knight of the Tower of Uruk, so he has the resources to initiate a search across all continents. Eris spoke in an indifferent tone, if you're not strong, you can't protect your family. It's a tragedy. At this moment, Roxy thought about her parents. It had been many years since they had argued, which had prompted her to leave her village. Although for the meagred family, that time was not excessive. Shall we then go to your family? My dear in-laws should move to a golden castle. I'll have 500 sword gods protect them 24 hours a day, Gilgamesh said in a cold and calculating tone. I think that won't be necessary. Roxy became nervous at the thought of what her parents would say when they met Gilgamesh. This. Eris pointed to a familiar last name and it turned out to be a message from Paul Grere. For Ludius, Zenith, Lilia, and Aisha are missing, but Norn is with me. Although I don't know where you are, I'm sure you can find your way back here. So, I've ruled out the idea of us meeting on the way. I'm heading to the Milis continent, to Zenith's home. I also left messages in Lilia's hometown, indicating where I'm headed. If you find them, use them to indicate your direction and try to contact me by sending a messenger to Milis. This method is valid for anyone, so whether you're Zenith or Lilia, follow the same method to get in touch with me. On the other hand, if you know me or have any relationship with my family, or if you are one of the former members of the Black Wolf Fang, I ask for your help in finding them. To my former companions from the Black Wolf Fang, I hope you still remember my name. I won't tell you to forgive and forget what I did. It's okay if you are still angry. But I beg you, please help me find my family. I'll lick your shoes if you want because I have nothing to pay you after seeing my properties disappear. Help me. Contact details, Milis Zion, Capital and Holy See on the Milis continent, Milis Zion Adventurers Guild. Clan name, The Search for Missing Fedora. Group name, Bana Search Team. Signed, Paul Grere. It's a surprise that he's still alive, said Gilgamesh, then added, but it's unfortunate if he hasn't found his family with all the available resources. They'll be fine. If we come across any news about them on the way, we'll do something about it. But getting too involved isn't in our interest, Eris said as she walked back to the tent. Then let's go see my family. Roxy thought that would be the best course of action, and they'd check the less visited places by humans. With that decision made, they all headed to a new continent. Chapter 161, The Demonic Continent. The lands in the Demonic Continent, as Roxy described, were very arid, and life was hard, especially when you had a family to feed. For that very reason, she wanted her parents to agree to live in the hidden paradise with the other villagers. As they flew over the lands of the Demonic Continent, Eris, who was wearing her beautiful armor, pointed out, it's amazing how this armor protects you from both heat and cold, maintaining a cool temperature at all times no matter what's happening outside. Mine is the same. Now that you mention it, I haven't felt hot. Roxy was surprised because she had kept her eyes closed for most of the journey, as the speed of their travel was extremely fast. Gilgamesh smiled and said, the armor you have on your bodies once belonged to goddesses who met their demise at my hands. I made sure to adapt them to your bodies, and indeed, now you both look very beautiful. How can you bring up those topics so suddenly? Eris exclaimed, her face turning red, while Roxy on the other side of him smiled slightly embarrassed. As they headed towards Roxy's village, suddenly, in the distance, what appeared to be a mountain shook slightly, showing signs of collapsing. This caught Gilgamesh's attention immediately, and he headed towards that place. Are we going to get involved in that? Eris stopped joking and instead became serious. Gilgamesh looked in the central direction in the distance and said, it depends on the situation we find ourselves in. Crack! 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 The mountain began to break in the distance, the air filled with a dark substance, and under Gilgamesh's gaze, a tunnel began to form. Everything seemed perfectly set for them to enter, as if whatever was inside was calling them. I don't know what's happening or what we'll face, but knowing that Roxy's village is nearby, it's better that we go in and find out if everything is in order. As I see it, it seems like a dungeon is forming, although it doesn't make much sense. Boom! However, as Gilgamesh's words had just finished, the entire demonic continent shook, and that dark substance pierced the sky. In the distant mountain, inside a deep cave, giant bone spires suddenly shot up from the ground towards the surface. Each bone was like a spear, over 10,000 meters high, black as night, and each one was infused with that dark energy. In just a second, several kilometers around were stained by that black substance. The sand, mountains, and rocks effortlessly turned into a hellish zone. Anyone without exception who saw this scene would be terrified, that's the word that could describe what was happening right now. Roar! At this point, a loud roar echoed in the distant sky. Suddenly, a red figure with large wings disturbed the clouds and at a tremendous speed headed toward the scene. That's a dragon! Seeing such a massive dragon for the first time, Eris and Roxy were amazed. Dragons in this world were known as the lords of the sky and earth, dominating any kind of combat against all kinds of enemies. However, when the dragon's roar echoed through the skies about 20 kilometers away, another roar was heard, and a massive firebird emerged from the depths of an active volcano. What kind of bird is that? Eris asked this question with complete ignorance of what was about to happen. Roxy, who was standing nearby, mentioned, "It seems to be an infernal bird. They are known to have been extinct for hundreds of years, but it appears that many haven't searched hard enough. What should we do?" Eris was strong, but these enemies had control of the air, and they didn't seem inclined to fight on the ground against her. Gilgamesh analyzed this situation that was spiraling out of control, and it was as strange as it was normal to him. It could be a coincidence as much as it could be a trap. He couldn't see beyond the future in this kind of situation because it involved a creature, and he also didn't want to see the future of any of his women at this moment. It's too late to ignore this situation, Gilgamesh gave a simple response as he moved to a much wider position. However, no matter how close he was to that dragon, it seemed that the creature didn't care at all. At that moment, just when they thought they were about to fight, the unthinkable happened. They weren't about to fight, but immediately after seeing what happened right in front of them, they began to flee in opposite directions, disappearing into the clouds. Now Gilgamesh narrowed his eyes. He observed the gigantic bone spires that emerged from the mountain like giant skyscrapers. Even someone like him was surprised to see this extremely strange scene. He didn't say anything more after mentioning that they couldn't ignore the situation, so he simply remained analyzing what he could see with the naked eye. "What is that thing?" Eris exclaimed, utterly shocked. "They seem to be bone remnants," Roxy replied softly, as if she didn't know what it was either. Gilgamesh then understood the situation a bit more and said, "It seems that this creature died thousands of years ago but somehow managed to borrow the bones of other creatures to manifest its body. What kind of wicked existence is that? Is it a beast from over 1,000 years ago suddenly wanting to resurrect?" Eris, rather than being afraid, got excited, remembering who she was with, so she had no fear. Gilgamesh smiled calmly, "It's not a magical creature or a wild beast. The creatures that just fled can be killed, but what we have in front of us is something complicated to kill for ordinary people. It's incredibly resilient beyond imagination if it has endured all those years in that state." Eris and Roxy couldn't help but be amazed. If such a thing existed in the world, the situation would be overwhelmingly daunting. "Get ready, let's see how strong that thing is." In a single second, Gilgamesh donned his golden armor and the chains of Enkija began to appear on the golden ripples above his vimana. When Gilgamesh prepared himself, he descended quickly and entered the pit that led to an unknown place. But no one said anything when he made this decision because they knew that the best and safest place was by his side. Chapter 162, A Halt. Gilgamesh mounted his vimana as he entered the dungeon. Anyone entering this place would look upon it with fear, as it was illuminated by the walls of lava and traces of bones that seemed to belong to various types of demons. It's curious how all demons don't have a similar bone structure, like Roxy, who belongs to the Magurd race, but her body can easily be confused with that of a human. There are lizardmen, bull demons, and many other somewhat unusual combinations. Due to this, Gilgamesh can't say for sure what the bone traces on the ground are. Due to the powerful roars of the beasts and the mountain's tremors, not to mention the enormous bones piercing the sky, this would attract the attention of groups of demonic magical beasts and many groups from nearby villages. As they descended deeper into the cave, which was growing larger, Roxy's expression changed significantly, and she murmured, "What kind of place is this?" Gilgamesh looked at the bone mountains ahead as he delved deeper into this deep cave and said, "A restaurant where beasts dine." Eris lost color and said, "Did you just say there was a beast trying to revive? What kind of thing is that, and how strong would it be?" "I don't know how strong it is, and it shouldn't be alive." Roxy peered into the cave and pointed, "All these bones are from demons, and it seems like these bones have been in this place for many years. In my opinion, Looking at the swords and spears alongside these bones, they could belong to the demon armies in the Second Human-Demon War. What you're saying is correct. Gilgamesh nodded and said, to be precise, from what little I could see of them, they were killed in the Second Human-Demon War. However, I can't say, and I believe no one knows, exactly what ended up killing them as such a massive army. Even if one is 10,000 times stronger than a human, if you face 10 million humans, you'll end up dead from exhaustion. On the other hand, the beast that's dead in this place should have been killed by something much more powerful. But again, I can't say what killed it. I also have limitations when I see the future. Gilgamesh's face turned cold as he thought of something and paused in his explanation. A year before his death, in one of the most brutal wars that humans had with the race created by the gods solely to punish them, divine beasts were sent to end his life. As the king of Uruk, he personally subdued all the divine beasts, but there was one that was much smarter. While he was dealing with other issues, a truly powerful being was born, which ended up causing him a lot of trouble before he managed to kill it. Later, due to the creature that had been born, he had to cut it into pieces and divide it into different areas where no kind of human would ever reach. At that time, Gilgamesh suffered many wounds like he had never had before, and it took a long time to heal. Of course, that divine beast was created to kill him and was one of the greatest threats in his previous life. But for some reason, right now, he could feel that presence, and he was boiling with fury because it meant many things he couldn't even carefully analyze. The moment Gilgamesh's expression turned cold, Eris and Roxy fell silent because they thought he might be trying to use his ability to see the future. They passed by huge bone mountains over the cave that was growing larger and deeper. The ground was full of numerous cracks, as if the earth had been scorched by incredibly powerful flames. What could have caused this damage? It's truly terrifying just to imagine what could have done all of this. I guess even dragons can't cause this kind of damage with their fire breath, right, Roxy? Eris whispered with a small voice that only she could hear. Let's descend for now. Gilgamesh leaped from his vimana and walked ahead, his senses on high alert, and a black sword materialized in his right hand. Roxy and Eris walked behind Gilgamesh, wielding their weapons as they moved across the dry, cracked ground. Something incredibly powerful had caused significant destruction here, and it had to be a powerful creature or an incredibly powerful being. They burned this land to such an extent that it's comparable to the heat of the sun. Can you imagine a spell causing this type of damage or some dragon? Gilgamesh said slowly, savoring these small experiences on his journey around the world with his future wives. These experiences were not only his own but also theirs. Finally, after walking for at least another half an hour, they reached the deepest part of the cave, which seemed to be the end of it all. This terrain was sunken. Originally, it was just a simple cave that had formed naturally, but it seemed to have been taken over by something. It was as if a meteor had penetrated the earth, and the ground was deeply sunken, with no bottom in sight. As if it were the bloody maw of a bloodthirsty beast, an inexplicable sensation filled the bodies of Eris and Roxy. Gilgamesh, on the other hand, was fine, and his calm demeanor brought a sense of security to Eris and Roxy, who would have left this place immediately if they were alone. They both looked around as if trying to find information, but there was nothing useful that provided any clues. Oh, this would have been fun if more people were here. Eris looked at Gilgamesh as if he were entirely without fear and said, "It must be incredible to not be afraid of anything." Gilgamesh smiled and said in a somewhat sad tone, "I'd be afraid of losing both of you, who can say? Perhaps a wicked and extremely handsome man in your eyes could win your hearts, and you'll leave me alone in a deep cave like this. Stop fooling around. What exactly do we do in this place?" Roxy was the one to bring order when Gilgamesh acted playfully, so she moved to the side while surveying their surroundings. "Oh, I don't want to say it, but when you're so cold to me, it makes my heart race. Is this what it feels like to be in love? We should get married right here on top of this place." Gilgamesh held his forehead as if he were very excited about the idea. "If we can extend our lifespans, it doesn't matter whether we get married now or in 10 years. We'll live together for so long that Roxy and I are afraid you'll leave us and marry younger women." Eris seemed to have found a way to playfully tease Gilgamesh, to which Roxy secretly congratulated her. "Oh, we're just kidding. I don't plan to marry anyone who doesn't please both of you. Of course, we must first get to know my in-laws and invite them to live in our castle in the hidden paradise," Gilgamesh said with an ironic smile, but then his smile disappeared, and he muttered, "Is that thing not going to come out?" "That thing?" Eris got nervous and immediately stood behind Roxy because she could conjure powerful defensive spells. "Hey, you, in the darkness, don't you want to come out and greet the visitors?" Gilgamesh asked in a very strange tone. "Humans, I give you the opportunity to leave this place and not disrupt the slumber of this monarch." A piercing voice echoed from the depths of the pit, shaking the cave and causing numerous rocks to impact the ground due to the vibration. Did the pit just speak? Eris didn't know what was happening, and it was clear that even Roxy didn't. "But we're here to talk. Come out, and maybe we can reach a friendly agreement," said Gilgamesh as a golden aura overflowed from his body, and he pointed, "If you don't come out, I will come for you." "Are you threatening me?" Chapter 163, Something Unexpected. "It's more like a warning. You enter my house and don't pay rent. How do you expect me to interpret your disrespectful actions?" Eris frowned and shouted, "Show yourself, and maybe we can talk on better terms, but most likely, you're just scared." "I don't think I'm scared." Roxy didn't share Eris's confidence, who seemed ready for battle even though she had been afraid of what they might find in this place just a little while ago. "Tiny humans, you surely have no idea who you're dealing with. I may be older than your parents and grandparents." At that moment, within the pitch-black tunnel, something began to crawl slowly. This made Eris and Roxy prepare themselves, but unlike them, Gilgamesh didn't make any move. Instead, he manipulated his Enkidu's chains for something that annoyed him. Crack! 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 As seconds passed, the bone-breaking footsteps grew closer to the exit of the deep pit, giving everyone more speculation about what might be emerging. What kind of monster would come out of that place? In their thoughts, this should be more ferocious than a raging dragon or a firebird. The heavy footfalls indicated that it was probably a deep-sea monster. "Is it coming towards us?" Eris asked, her expression simple yet fierce, showing with just one look that no matter what happens, she wouldn't give up easily. "Calm down. Nothing will happen that you haven't seen before." The relaxed look on Gilgamesh's face even made Roxy lower her guard a bit. "Little human, stop boasting in this place. If I truly wanted danger, then I'm afraid it would be impossible for you to even protect yourself." At that moment, a huge white bone appeared in front of everyone, and just as they were about to take action, something incredible happened in front of them. "Is that a dog?" Roxy asked, extremely impressed. "Isn't that bone part of the monster you mentioned, Gil?" Eris also chimed in after seeing a beautiful long-eared black dog chewing on a huge bone as it emerged from the pit. The dog's ears reached down to its chest, and it kept its eyes fixed on the women beside Gilgamesh. After a glance at them, the dog shook its head as if regretting something. Typically, we associate breeds with long ears as having a keen sense of smell, but this dog was very different. "You're an incredible creature, don't you speak now?" Gilgamesh cast a curious look at the long-eared dog and said, "Usually, dogs aren't like you, even though they like bones, they don't usually seek such large ones." "What?" Gilgamesh's words left Roxy and Eris astonished. Had this long-eared dog just spoken to them? Boom! Dropping the enormous bone that possibly weighed tons, the long-eared dog was about to act, but after looking at Gilgamesh, its movements came to a halt for a long time. "That armor, the chains. No, it can't be him. You have the same body as him. Wait, shouldn't I ask him instead? That dog is crazy." Eris lost interest in a potential fight and sheathed her sword. Intrigued by the dog's strange behavior, Gilgamesh approached it and asked with a smile, "Are you a human trapped in a dog's body? Are you Gilgamesh, the king of heroes?" The dog exclaimed while leaping several meters in disbelief. "How do you know that?" Gilgamesh was very interested in how a dog could know that. But as if it were something incredible, the long-eared dog shouted, "My lord Gilgamesh, king of heroes! I never thought I'd meet you in this place. How did my lord end up here? Wait, are we in some kind of holy grail or something related to it? I can't believe it, my lord. I never thought I'd meet someone as extraordinary as you in my life as a dog." Eris looked at the dog, who seemed to be crying with excitement after recognizing Gilgamesh. She thought of many things, but her thoughts stopped when she heard many of the titles the dog recognized in her fiancé. "Is that your friend Enkidu?" Roxy asked, genuinely confused. Reviewing her memories, she couldn't find any connections that related Enkidu to a dog, and certainly not the way Gilgamesh would react upon reuniting with his friend. While she believed it to be incredible, she still wanted to know who this dog was and what Gilgamesh intended to do with him. The dog, whose name was Kusenfeel, stared at Gilgamesh for a moment and then said, "My lord, though I arrived here on pure instinct, I knew that greater things awaited me in this place. Gilgamesh laughed a little and said, I'm sure the situation is the same for both of us. So, let me ask you, how do you know who I am? Ctto, now aware that he was in front of a king, changed his tone instantly and began speaking respectfully. My lord, from this moment on, I will address you as my great lord, the king of Uruk. You are a legendary figure in my world, a powerful and wise ruler. My knowledge and respect for you multiply with every moment I spend near you. You can't even imagine how many people know and admire you. He wasn't lying. Although it was more challenging for Gilgamesh to view the past lives of animals, he observed Ctto's life in just a few minutes and discovered that he was older than he appeared. After seeing certain images, he knew that there was nothing unusual about Ctto, and he had apparently been reincarnated. Ha! Gilgamesh, who had appeared calm, began laughing out loud as he looked at Ctto and said, I never thought someone other than my wives would recognize my true greatness, but you certainly know more about me than you let on. At this moment, a question came to Gilgamesh, should he eliminate this long-eared dog? If it ended up siding with the enemy, there would likely be problems. However, as if he didn't expect what was about to happen, Ctto lowered his head and said, please, let me swear loyalty. What did you say? Eris couldn't stay calm anymore. This dog was definitely very strange, and she didn't want to have it around. Gilgamesh looked at Eris and said, didn't you want a dragon? This dog is much more interesting than you can imagine. Roxy looked at Gilgamesh and advised him, are you interested in having a dog as your ally? I don't mind. Gilgamesh turned to the dog and took out a metal cube. Go ahead, make your oath. Yes, my lord. Ctto was more than excited to hear that Gilgamesh had accepted him. Originally, he would have believed that he would be killed if this Gilgamesh were one of the many he remembered. Chapter 164, Dog. Countless moons ago, in an unknown and distant world, Ctto found himself incarnated as a humble dog. This world was vast, filled with wonders and dangers that surpassed his imagination. As a passionate lover of fantasy realms, Ctto faced an overwhelming challenge. The first days were the most difficult. He was alone in the midst of imposing nature, struggling to find food and shelter. Every step was a painful lesson in survival. Hunger gnawed at his insides, and the beasts of the unknown world lurked in the shadows. Nevertheless, Ctto was a born fighter and didn't give up. With time, he began to learn the signs of the environment and developed cunning to evade hostile creatures. But the most challenging of all was the language barrier. Howls and barks weren't enough to communicate in a world of human speakers. Ctto felt lonely, lost, and helpless. Years passed in his quest for survival, facing powerful magical beasts and threats that challenged his very existence. Each day was an exhausting struggle, but Ctto clung to the hope of a better tomorrow. One day, while exploring a dark and mysterious forest, Ctto stumbled upon an extraordinary fruit. Its sweet and alluring aroma drew him in like magic. He consumed the fruit cautiously, and in the blink of an eye, he felt a surge of energy and power flowing through his body. The fruit somehow transformed him into a dog of incomparable strength. His muscles grew stronger, his senses sharpened, and an astonishing longevity stretched out before him. Now, he could confront the beasts that had once terrified him and live without the constant fear of death. Ctto knew he had found more than just a magical fruit, he had discovered the opportunity to write his own legend in this unknown world. With determination and confidence, he began to learn the human language. The once incomprehensible words and phrases became familiar to him, and he could communicate meaningfully with the inhabitants of the world. However, he soon realized that he could do nothing but steal and escape from human villages in distant directions. He was not proud of what he did, but in the life of survival, one must make the decision to survive or die. Many, from the comfort of their homes, can say that it is a low act of morality, but they could never understand the heavy burden one carries to survive. By the time he committed these dirty acts, he didn't feel proud, and even the desire to live grew weaker. I am alone, I walk alone in the unknown world. He could not become human again, there was nothing that could make him human again. Delving deep into memories of the past, he took long naps that lasted for years and woke up only to wander through the ever-changing world. After some time, he became more audacious and stole extremely valuable items. At one point, he was the pet of a beautiful mage who never married and, in the end, left him all her riches. At another time, he served a king as his companion, who died of old age and also bequeathed him great wealth. Living so long isn't all that fantastic when you do it alone. At no point could Ctto receive love, even if his sense of being a dog was dormant after entering this body. He had thought he would turn into a human after a while, but there was no possibility of finding something like that, and he finally accepted being a dog with long ears. I enjoy anything dangerous or fun, even participating in the last human-demon war as the companion of a human commander. His age, of course, exceeded hundreds of years, and to be honest, he stopped considering himself both a human trapped in a dog's body and ceased being a dog as well. In his eyes and in the eyes of others, he was a deity walking in the world of the living, and this he found somewhat acceptable. As the years passed, he decided to go back to sleep, and when he woke up, a sweet scent made him run to a completely dark and very deep place. However, when he was enjoying a delicious bone, he sensed a very powerful presence. It was something he had never seen before, and when the voice of that entity addressed him, he immediately responded. There was nothing that could harm him, though blows hurt, he had never been injured, so he wasn't afraid. But when he ran out of the pit, he saw that man with golden armor and a black sword with feathers in his right hand. He admits it, he felt fear and decided to pretend to be a dog dragging his bone towards the outside. Unfortunately, that bone he had in his mouth was extremely large, and when that entity spoke to him, he knew there was no escape. Turning his gaze back to that man with golden hair and blood-red eyes, a vague memory of his life in the modern world came to his mind. In both history and video games, animated series, and books, there is a man who sought immortality. His name was Gilgamesh, and he was once the king of Uruk. However, his version in video games and animation was standing right in front of him. All Ctto could think was, Gilgamesh? How is it that this king of kings is in this world, and I never realized it? Wait, is this a Holy Grail war? He had knowledge of Gilgamesh's history, but he was very confused because he couldn't understand how this man had come to this world. However, he was sure that he might have a way to turn a beast into a human. In this kind of situation, only two things could happen. One is that he swears loyalty to him and ends up dead instead, the other way is that they reject him and then attack him, but in this case, he ends up alive. Both are terribly bad, but he didn't care. If he could somehow survive, it would be more than enough because he might find a way to become human. Come on, your mother is more of a bitch, and I wasn't even with her. Ctto shouted at Agostino, who was right in front of him. You damn dog, I'm going to cut you into pieces. Ctto grinned cheekily and raised his right paw, aiming his cannon at one of the adventurers. After that, as if it were a water gun, he began to shoot urine. That's disgusting. They called me a dog, that's how dogs act. Gilgamesh smiled, watching the performance of this peculiar being. To him, it was a good choice to have some fun in the group, and he was sure that this dog would be very helpful. Haha. Roxy had an extremely pale expression as she watched the urine shoot out like fireworks. How could that dog do that? Chapter 165, A Loyal Being. So, have you found anything other than that bone you brought from inside? Roxy interrupted the enthusiastic Ctto and instead asked him an essential question that was important to know before leaving this place. My lady, I didn't find anything more interesting than this tasty bone. I can say that over time, I got used to being a dog. It's not a bad thing after all. I'm still more handsome than anyone else except for my lord and his family. But when I want to embrace a beautiful woman, I just have to act cute, and it's like an illusion spell. Eris frowned and muttered, what a pig. Gilgamesh smiled a little and said, we should continue exploring this place. Everyone began to descend on Gilgamesh's Vimana, and the most excited to be on this magical ship was Ctto, who seemed to be on the verge of tears the whole time as he admired every detail of this incredible vessel. On the other hand, Gilgamesh wanted to leave all of this behind and head back to Roxy's village, but his senses told him that something was watching them in this place. This feeling made him a bit angry, but having two beautiful women by his side, he ignored that anger and continued to descend. After Gilgamesh and Ctto had stopped talking, Eris's voice sounded from the side, and she asked, how does he know of your legends if he doesn't belong to your world? Roxy argued with a calm voice, maybe it's the same world but in a different time, then it wouldn't make sense for Gil to be recognized as a great legend. Well, I was quite famous and egotistical in my past life. That's not a bad thing, but it's possible that everyone recognized my greatness during that time after my glorious departure. Gilgamesh's voice was clear and loud, as if he wanted to show his wives once again that he had been the best choice for them. Again, Ctto's voice trembled, and he said, of course, as your loyal subordinate, I can say that you are the most amazing person in the world. A human who defied all odds and someone I've admired for many years. At that moment, Gilgamesh had reached a deep area where the air was extremely thin. In this situation, Gilgamesh produced a small tree that filled the space of 100 meters with all the necessities for a human to live. I can finally breathe something other than earth. Roxy seemed much calmer, but at that moment, in front of them, there was a vast underground world where a gigantic crimson tree stood. Lava waterfalls filled the surroundings, and soon Gilgamesh noticed that there were more people in the distance. Hey, you said there was no one down here except you. Eris was confused as she saw beastmen, demons, and humans appearing right down here. Gilgamesh thought for a moment and said, there may be more entrances to this place. We were delayed in arriving due to the unexpected but not untimely presence of Ctto, but that's not a problem. If there's something that interests me in this place, no one will stop me from taking it. At that moment, as Gilgamesh was teasing Eros and Roxy while pulling out a box of chocolates, a group of presences appeared in front of them, and right at that moment, Ctto started barking angrily. Quiet your dog, or it will attract unexpected disasters, came a cold voice from the front. Who's a dog? I'm a divine beast, I'm the best mount of my lord Gilgamesh. PFF. Eris, who was drinking water, spat it all out when she heard Ctto's audacious words. Ctto? I am Agostino, Emperor of the Sword and the leader of a group of adventurers hired by the Milis continent to explore this place, Agostino said in a highly arrogant tone. Agostino, dog without an owner, everything you find bears the name of my lord Gilgamesh, so you better watch your hands or they might get cut off. Ctto was saving these people's lives. He knew that if he didn't intervene in this conversation, Gilgamesh would kill them without much thought. Agostino's eyes turned fierce. Suddenly, his body was filled with an immensely powerful battle aura, and he said slowly, I suppose you're Gilgamesh, seeing as you've been silent. Are you going to let a dog speak for you? Agostina. Ownerless dog, who do you think you are? Ctto coldly disdained this man. Did you just call me Agostina? Agostino's aura covered the surroundings and began to shake the earth. In an instant, his strength rose to one of the most powerful a man could achieve in his life. It seems this pig won't stop until he gets a beating, my lord, this is in your hands. Ctto smartly stepped back and sat down on his butt while wagging his tail from side to side, as if he were not the cause of this entire situation. Hey, idiot, do you think that with your puny strength, you can do anything against us? Upon hearing those words, Ctto opened his eyes, pleasantly surprised and gaining confidence, he said, yes, weak dog, you're just looking for a quicker funeral than usual. You damn idiots, since that's the case, I have no choice but to kill you all. Gilgamesh smiled calmly and said, well, since this problem naturally came to me in a questionable way, I'll handle it. This is very easy to fix. Simply apologize and get out of my sight, only then will you live. Gilgamesh's words stirred everyone present, who had gathered to see what was happening. Agostino was clearly more dangerous than Gilgamesh in everyone's eyes, but the man in the golden armor's arrogance seemed to have no end. What was even more ridiculous was that it appeared that Gilgamesh only needed to lift a finger to eliminate a sword emperor. Agostino's face turned pale, and he said, you fool, you're looking to die. Immediately, the battle aura around his body surged, and this energy was directed towards Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh stared at him impassively and didn't say a word. He didn't even move from his position and then said, Eris, he wants to fight, so give him some entertainment and kill him for me. Today, I'm very calm, and I don't want to lose focus on insignificant matters like these. Eris rose with a sadistic smile on her face. In an instant, her body was covered in a golden battle aura. Like a Valkyrie descending onto the battlefield, her face was flawless and incredibly beautiful. Certainly, after her body had developed in the best possible way, both she and Roxy became even more beautiful in Gilgamesh's eyes. Gilgamesh was delighted by this action, so much so that he even started to enjoy what would happen next. Roxy didn't say anything but was certainly concerned that things might go wrong, but after seeing Eris's excitement, she simply smiled. I hope no one else attacks, they'd be killed by her in a matter of seconds. Gilgamesh looked at Roxy and said, no one would intervene in a sword emperor's fight, but there are certainly fools in the world. Your wife is extremely powerful and beautiful, my lord, worthy to walk by your side in adrenaline-filled situations like this. Ctto had suddenly appeared at Gilgamesh's side. After all, even though he couldn't die, it didn't mean he didn't feel pain. Chapter 166, A Queen. Eris unleashed her already astonishing battle aura, but her murderous intent penetrated the surroundings. For a moment, the invincible power of the Golden Lion's battle aura made the surroundings feel colder than usual. She was like a battle goddess, capable of assuming absolute destructive power. The presence of her noble phantasm of Eris swept through the surroundings, causing everyone nearby to be utterly surprised. Such a powerful battle aura, not to mention her weapon, it was even stronger than a sword emperor, so many wondered, is that the sword god rank? Seeing that battle aura punishing the surroundings, unstoppable and untouchable, it caused Agostino's face to sink into absolute despair. Gilgamesh noticed the hesitation on his enemy's face and said, deliberately mocking, with just this, you still dared to say that you would kill me with total arrogance. Aren't you a sword genius? What's wrong? Compared to my dear Eris, with only her brute training, her excellent swordsmanship, and that beautiful fire sword, she's not arrogant in front of the weaker ones. You, trash that crossed my path, are even more arrogant than a stupid and useless king, isn't that funny? This time, Gilgamesh was letting the people who would follow him from now on adapt to his behavior. They themselves must know how to act and what punishment to give without regrets. Therefore, his words made Agostino serve as a lightning rod for anger. Although Gilgamesh was harsh, he still made many people around him directly agree with him. In the end, there will always be people as powerful as Eris, they are all there, and no one can avoid it. But if, on the contrary, they encounter people like Agostino, many will die for a simple oversight. Everyone dies and lives in different ways, some are good at swordplay, and others are just ordinary people who know how to move against the wind like free birds. But they are all at the mercy of the stronger ones, and if they are not noble and respectful, only tragic endings remain for those who encounter them. Eris was a war goddess, however, she acted under the orders of Gilgamesh, who was just sitting on his throne while a woman equally as beautiful and delicate as a flower caressed his hair. Some of the adventurers following Agostino simply felt rage. They knew things had reached an impasse, so they would act according to their word and defend Agostino from any enemy who dared to attack them. Seeing Eris and Agostino about to fight in an atmosphere of death, an old man among the distant crowd quickly stood up to try to negotiate. Miss Eris, why exactly must we fight now? We're in a situation where we could die without realizing and encounter extremely valuable treasures. Instead of fighting, we should be joining forces. But now that we're fighting, isn't this a ridiculous ending? Everyone has their pride, but if both sides take a step back, it will all end in a simple discussion. This old man was a cunning fox, he had lived for so long that he had turned into a demon. He realized that Eris alone was enough to kill them all in this place without much effort, and he had heard rumors of an incredibly powerful man named Gilgamesh. Regardless of whether this was true or not, he didn't expect to see them fighting against a group of more than 200 strong and experienced adventurers. In his eyes, it wasn't worth it. This old man, relying on his knowledge, advised Agostino and Eris, who realized that there would be no fight, backed down to Gilgamesh's side. At that moment, everyone, regardless of their race, would feel envy, jealousy and resentment for not being the man protected by that woman. Eris Grytat, with her origin and talents, as well as her unparalleled appearance, was the woman of a man whom everyone considered a tyrant and an idiot who had no comparison. For them, this man was not worth it, being followed by two beautiful women was not something they liked to see. If counted, there would be countless suitors seeking Eris's hand, among those of her same age, across all continents. She had to be by the side of a man whom everyone unconsciously held a grudge against. We should go. Agostino turned around without wanting to continue this discussion, but at that moment, his senses warned him that something was approaching, and in a matter of seconds, countless swords pierced numerous parts of his body, sending him flying and leaving him in a pool of thick blood. Boom! The powerful shockwave sent many other weaker men flying, and the falling rocks hit many adventurers, burying many under the rubble. Gilgamesh was not a good person towards those who directed their ill feelings towards him, he had never changed in that aspect, so he directed his gaze at the old man and said in a calm tone, I must say that your words are correct. Unfortunately, I cannot forgive someone who has threatened me with death, even if it is your god. Let's go, said the old man with a pale expression after seeing so many dead from a single attack by this man named Gilgamesh. Eris, on the side, was shocked. She wanted to say something but couldn't find the words to express how she felt, so she just said, I'm sorry. Why are you apologizing, my dear Eris? Gilgamesh asked as he manipulated his Vimana and headed into the depths of the formed path. I should have killed him. Eris knew that's what she should have done, but in the end, the old man's words had convinced her that there was no need to fight. I understand that you think I'm strong, and mere threats don't affect me, but you must understand that the value of a word is the sharpness of a sword. Intentions are reflected in feelings, words, and thoughts. If you let that pass, the next time that man or woman addresses you, what follows are actions. I understand, it won't happen again. Eris deeply regretted not acting immediately. For a moment, she had lost herself and didn't think clearly. Many of the people had advanced to the special area where treasures could be found. After all, this place was completely unknown to both adventurers and regular people. Roxy, who saw Eris sad, said in a gentle tone, maybe you didn't feel it was necessary now, but in the future, you'll know when to act, and I'm sure you'll unsheath your sword against the first enemy who attacks. It's not considered a defeat but a victory to leave the battlefield unscathed. Yes! Eris exclaimed, very excited. Although she felt sad, Gilgamesh seemed not to care about her earlier actions, and Roxy supported her with comforting words. Hurry, hurry, hurry! I've heard that the most important treasures are usually found in the earliest expeditions. Seeing many adventurers leave, some mercenaries began to follow them to try their luck and find something valuable. Gilgamesh squinted his eyes. Many will die in this place. Is it really dangerous? Ctto asked, who had been chewing on a bone like a normal dog for some time. It is. As I understand it, in these types of cases, many may die, and they would only be feeding whatever is currently resurrecting. It's unfortunate for that thing that we arrived, but I believe we are the chosen ones now to prevent a catastrophe. They should die, they all choose their path, and you know perfectly well that they can't avoid it. They're not that important to you, right, my lord? Ctto asked in a mysterious tone, but suddenly a water ball struck his head. Who's attacking us? Roxy, with her finger pointed at Ctto, told him in a cold tone, stop talking as if you were a sage. Chapter 167, The Cause. Eris felt truly bad for not being able to accomplish what she had set out to do. She was confident she could achieve it, but at the last moment, she believed it wasn't necessary. In Gilgamesh's eyes, Eris was a beauty capable of driving a man mad, a woman like a goddess who could steal people's souls, someone in need of care and attention. Up close, her particularly captivating and well-rounded breasts, faintly visible, made him momentarily forget his age. Gilgamesh smiled and approached her. Using an indescribable rhythm of seduction, he gently leaned in by her ear. Then, he spoke in a tone he rarely used, reserved for very intimate situations, and said, do you know what cause and effect are? You are a radiant red diamond, why worry so much when you're already mine? After finishing speaking, he gently nibbled on her earlobe. Ah! Eris reacted like a cat whose paw had been stepped on, she gasped and wanted to pull away, but Gilgamesh held her by the waist to keep her close. Suddenly, Eris's body began to warm up, much like the rising of a hot spring. This new sensation tingled all her senses. At this point, Eris's face flushed sensually, and her little gasp immediately caught Roxy's attention. But Roxy only smiled and shook her head, prepared to stop Gilgamesh if he continued teasing Eris. Gil, what are you doing in this situation? Her demeanor was incredibly adorable, with shyness and audacity radiating from her gaze. Instead of being scared, she felt unexpectedly happy. Any man who saw her charm would end up falling in love. You've truly become a beautiful, dignified, and radiant woman, surpassing any mortal treasure. Gilgamesh enjoyed this beauty in silence. Finally, Eris managed to regain her composure, looking directly at Gil and said, you should focus on what lies ahead, we might fall into a trap. Besides, you know perfectly well that you can have me whenever you want. I prefer to see you like this for a few more years. Gilgamesh wasn't in a rush to share a bed with his two women right now, he wanted to give it time and let everything develop naturally. Yes, well, you give me certain doubts. Eris couldn't finish her last words when Gilgamesh's right hand began to caress her right ear. I will focus on what lies ahead now, you shouldn't get distracted either. As Gilgamesh ventured deeper into the character, gazing at that massive door, a sinister dark energy became apparent. There weren't many people here, and many wouldn't dare set foot in this place. Does anyone have any idea what we might encounter in that place? Gilgamesh calmly looked at the people around him. Sitting beside Gilgamesh, Roxy couldn't help but exclaim as she looked around, aren't we inside the hell known as the demonic continent? Don't say such terrifying things, Roxy. My grandfather used to say we manifest what we speak aloud. Eris immediately became a bit agitated by those statements. Ctto, the faithful thief, chimed in, "Don't worry, mafias fear sacred dogs like me. Well, I'm a great sacred beast, so there's nothing to fear." "Did you just say you're a sacred beast?" Gilgamesh stood up, looked ahead, and said, "Don't get tense, we can't escape from our own history anyway." The scene before them was extremely unique and special. It seemed like they were in an area where darkness originated, and the giant isolated statues on the sides were just a small part compared to their surroundings. This is some kind of veneration zone, a unique place where darkness is revered and the light is denied. Incredible, we've traveled far and now we can't turn back. Gilgamesh felt excited, what was around them was special to him. There are inscriptions on the bodies of the stone giants, do you know exactly what they say? Gilgamesh was curious about it, and Ctto had extensive knowledge of this place. The gateway to the underworld, the cause of the effect, the palace of the wicked Typa. Ctto's body trembled a bit, but after thinking about who he was and who he was with, he said, "I've traveled night roads that others wouldn't dare speak of even during the day. I've spoken with gods, loved women, and written songs that are now used as counting songs. I can't be wrong, although this place shouldn't exist, we are at the beginning of everything." Eris and Roxy felt a dark presence descending from their surroundings, something that drew them in like a magnet, bringing them closer and closer to the setting. Gilgamesh smiled with even more interest and murmured, "I suppose it was my destiny, the one I chose, and the one that drew me here. Isn't it so?" Chapter 168, The Effect. The Palace of Wicked Talajar. Upon hearing that name, Roxy shuddered all over, and her calm face turned a bit pale. "I've heard legends about this place we're in and who owns it. What's kept here is like an immortal demon, it won't die no matter how much time passes, even if killed multiple times. No matter whom it encounters, death awaits them, and it becomes their food. However, from ancient times until now, no one has written more about this place than just a legend of lost gods." "Are there gods?" Eris, who was standing by, heard the mention of gods and asked, "Tell me, why are we here? We don't need anything from this place, and staying inside it is extremely suffocating." Ctto shook his head and said, "Make your choice. That's the question we'll be asked in that place. I suppose we didn't come here by choice, but we were drawn here for a specific purpose. My lord Gilgamesh, can you unleash your full power at any moment?" When he asked this of Gilgamesh, Ctto raised his canine head to meet his gaze, and he affirmed due to the silence, "I'm saying this to prepare or not, though so far, there's nothing that can harm me, there's always the possibility that something could kill me. I've heard numerous legends about beings similar to the ones mentioned in this place. However, whether gods or demons, sacred beasts or descendants of godly apostles, there has never been one who can stand against me in a death match. Tell me, Ctto, why are you here?" Ctto thought for a moment and said, "I woke up from my long slumber near this place, something delicious called me to this place, and just before I met you, I thought it was a bone." "So, you're here because something called you?" Gilgamesh understood. Ctto has the body of a divine beast but is incomplete. He somehow wants to break that seal to be able to use both his strength and magical abilities, but it's impossible for him right now. So, when his senses tell him about something delicious, it should mostly be related to something that can break his seal. Thinking about it, Gilgamesh smiled slightly and pointed, "I guess you're lucky in that, but we won't find anything delicious in this place. I'm not sure if there's a god in this world who can be my rival, but at least, we won't find one in this dark place." "I understand, my lord." Ctto couldn't go against Gilgamesh's words, he would die if he did. "But, isn't it your first time in this place? I haven't felt anything since I arrived here, and you also mentioned that it's hard to see the future unless it's about a person." Eris was a bit confused, she wanted to learn all the skills Gilgamesh uses in such situations. "Oh, I never said I always need to see the future, I'm special when it comes to observing people." Gilgamesh began to caress Eris's neck, causing her to fall silent. "Bravo, how would you know if there are gods or demons in this place? You're just speculating at best." A beast man snorted in the distance, unwilling to believe the word of a cold-blooded killer. "Aren't we going to eliminate them?" Ctto was ready to charge into battle despite his poor combat abilities. Gilgamesh smiled and said, "They will suffer in this place, what's the use of doing anything when they're already being punished for their arrogance? Come on, let's go to a much more interesting place where we can surely find something incredible." Gilgamesh manipulated his Vimana in a different direction. The moment Gilgamesh was the first to enter, many of the people around were very excited. Many secretly wished for him to meet a certain death, as no one could endure his arrogance and the ease with which he moved. There were many people in this place, some of whom were extremely strong, and after seeing Gilgamesh advance, many others took a different path. The rest, weaker ones, followed in the same direction but behind those who wanted to take the lead. The surroundings were complex, but beneath this vast underground world, there were many hidden treasures. Not only were there rare plants and medicinal herbs, but also treasures like metal ores, stones hiding precious diamonds, and materials to create powerful weapons. Sharp vitality. An elderly man quickly said in an excited tone, "We must take this water to create magical fish. It would be of great benefit if we manage to breed fish in this type of water." Autumn Sararo. Many were excited about things that, in Gilgamesh's eyes, were nothing more than garbage. After all, he had everything at his door in Babylon, and when he says he has everything, there's nothing that can be bought from him. However, when everyone was desperately collecting the treasures around them, many shadows moved silently like tree roots emerging from the mud and stones. Some shadows were as large as an arm, while others were as thin as a hair. They were like dark serpents silently advancing and searching for their targets. Ah! Suddenly, there was a miserable scream as if someone's soul was being torn apart. A shadow, the size of a long river, suddenly emerged from the darkness and pierced a person's chest. What's happening? The abrupt change happened very suddenly, leaving many people in the vicinity confused and terrified. Boom! Crack! But at that moment, a new shadow emerged from the ceiling and, like a snake, pierced the head of another adventurer. Numerous shadows pierced his body, not even giving him time to react. Shields! 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 A mage roared and raised his staff, generating a powerful magic shield. Then, with a swift light attack, he severed the shadows that were moving in the darkness like venomous snakes. Arg! The dying adventurers couldn't believe what was happening. When the shadows pierced their bodies, they absorbed all the blood like a vampire, similar to a leech but at a rapid pace, and after leaving the body dry, they sank back into the ground. What kind of monsters are these? Seeing the events that happened right before their eyes, many of the adventurers felt fear and couldn't move a single muscle. Crack! 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 In a flash, more snake-like shadows emerged from the ground and attacked other people who were desperately trying to gather resources. Spawn of demons! A powerful swordsman swung his sword and cut down several shadows that emerged from the darkness, and shockwaves exploded like bombs. In an instant, the dark shadows were shattered one after another. However, these shadows were more terrifying than they could imagine. Even if they were cut in half or attacked with fire magic, they escaped immediately underground. Only complete destruction would be their true end. Ah! Momentarily, there were many lamentable screams in the vicinity. Many adventurers were overwhelmed by the disaster and were completely torn apart by the shadows. Chapter 169, I've been searching for you. There were many strange and wonderful underground treasures. At this moment, many of the adventurers and mercenaries who were very excited were being massacred by the apparitions that emerged from below the earth. This place used to be a treasure land in its own right, and then it was entrenched by darkness itself. The treasures left with the bodies of those buried here had filled this place with relics and dark energy. After thousands of years, this treasure land was able to give birth to many strange plants and herbs, along with treasures of divine metals and minerals. However, when these adventurers were blinded by their great luck, darkness attacked and was too strong to face. The abrupt change happened too quickly, leaving many of the mercenaries who were trailing behind surprised. Boom! Many could see a shadow draining the blood of an adventurer and, like a snake, burrowing into the ground. Then, it suddenly appeared on the other side and stabbed another practitioner. Run, we must get out of this place now. If we run, we die, we can't turn our backs on the enemy. The frightened knight roared and lunged forward with his saber at this strange, seemingly living shadow. He split the shadow in half, but the remaining fragment still pierced through his chest like an arrow. The dying knight couldn't believe this outcome. When the shadow pierced his chest, it absorbed all his blood, then suddenly burrowed back underground. What kind of monster is this? Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. In a flash, waves of shadow attacks burst forth from the earth and targeted the other mercenaries in the rear. Everyone, fall back! A king-class mage finally took action. He unleashed a powerful magical aura and instantly set the surroundings ablaze with towering flames. In an instant, he destroyed one shadow after another amidst the powerful waves of heat. Ah! In a moment, there were many lamentable cries within the vast cave. Many mages and swordsmen met the same fate of being pierced and drained of their blood. Boom! Many fire-class mages began taking action, especially those who could cast powerful fire spells. They were extremely dominant, and each of their movements destroyed an attacking tendril. The strongest of them all was still an elder. He was surrounded by a growing golden light that swept through wherever he walked. All the shadows, no matter how large, had to retreat in the presence of this light bestowed by the Holy Church of Milis. A father of the Church of Milis. Seeing such a strong aura, many adventurers following behind him were amazed. With the Milis Church mage protecting the front, everything became safer. Don't just stand there, attack! Some powerful adventurers didn't lag behind either. They all raised their swords and clashed with the shadows still advancing toward them. Boom! There were many sounds in the deep cave. There were sounds of pain, screams, and also the cheers of people who had found treasures, all woven into one melody. The deeper the path inward, the stronger the attacks from the shadows. Many more adventurers suffered, but the large groups of mercenaries decided to press on. For them, the treasures here were too tempting. Besides, no one had seen anything incredible that could be considered the greatest treasure of this place. Due to the presence of so many mysterious plants and rare underground metals, all the mercenaries and adventurers were even more convinced that there was a divine treasure, just as the legends had claimed. Gilgamesh found his way and also encountered attacks from the shadows, but this was no problem for him. Boom! Suddenly, a shadow the size of an arm shot up from the ground and lunged towards Gilgamesh with lightning speed. The speed of the shadow was swift, but Gilgamesh was even faster. He grabbed the shadow and crushed it with his hand. However, even though the shadow was crushed, it turned into smaller shadows like needles and aimed at penetrating his muscles. But as soon as his golden aura erupted, the temperature of his body slowly rose, and clearly, these shadows couldn't pierce his body. Gilgamesh sneered coldly and raised his body temperature even further. Boom! In one go, the entire huge shadow was turned into ashes. These root-like shadows were very long. Whenever Gilgamesh pulled them out of the ground, they writhed around him like serpents. In no time, Gilgamesh was densely covered by 3 layers of these roots. Get lost! Gilgamesh released his presence once again, and the temperature of his body reached inhuman levels, exerting incredibly powerful damage. Just a few seconds were enough to make all the shadows on his body disappear. Some that weren't wiped away fell to the ground and tried to move, attempting to pierce the skin. Then, Gilgamesh pulled out a fire fan and waved it as he stood on his vimana. With a single swish of his fan, a powerful wave of fire burst around and pushed away all the shadows. After a few seconds, the divine force on his muscles shattered the surrounding walls. Informal wave. Compared to Gilgamesh, Roxy merely used fire spells to divert the shadows in front of her. On the other hand, Eris swung her sword, and her figure was like pure diamond shining in a reddish hue. The shadows in the vicinity that sought to stab Eris couldn't get close to her. They were even afraid of her bloody aura that she was emitting. Eris swung her sword and swept through the air. The sword's edge annihilated all the shadows with the help of its fire attributes. However, the simplest and most direct was Kun's feel. He stayed behind everyone. He wasn't foolish, he knew he would be dragged into the deep darkness if caught. Come on, you can do it. Water Goddess, bestow your blessing on the rear to ambush us. Kun's feel started barking like crazy behind Roxy. You're so annoying, you idiot dog. Roxy turned around and cast a powerful fire spell that exploded forcefully. At first, I doubted because the great Gilgamesh was accompanied by 2 women he considers as his wives. Now I can understand a bit, Kun's feel said as he moved neither too close nor too far from Gilgamesh. He wasn't stupid enough to go head-on in this situation. Chapter 170, Ancient Monster, Shadow of Black Adversity. Boom! 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 The deeper Gilgamesh went, the more frequently the shadows in the surroundings attacked. These shadows were darker than darkness itself, and thanks to the walls glowing with a lava-red hue, they could identify the enemy. However, these shadows became thicker and had greater strength. In the deepest area, the shadows seemed to be made of steel. To the dismay of the others, not even simple swords and spells below the holy level could easily cut through them. To protect his women, Gilgamesh had to wield 2 long swords, one with ice attributes and one with fire attributes, both shining with great power. In addition to that, he unleashed the Inkiju chains to protect the points he was neglecting. What is this? Eris was surprised. At this moment, the shadows, which were originally black, changed to a much lighter color, similar to blood, and moved towards her with much more speed and brutality than before. These shadows are probably composed of the blood it absorbed from other living beings. We are getting closer to its nest, so it's pressing its attacks with much more desperation. Gilgamesh, who was calm, pointed out, the body of this monster is hidden beneath the earth, and it uses the shadows as an attack, so as long as we can find what's causing these shadows, we will stop being attacked. With that said, Gilgamesh increased his power and, after telling Roxy to maneuver her Vimana, he fully released his divine aura. In just a few seconds, this was more than enough for the shadows to stop attacking him and not dare to approach. Gilgamesh's divinity surpassed that of the known gods, which was why the attacks ceased. Suddenly, the cave just behind Gilgamesh was filled with ancient shadows. It seemed as if venomous serpents were eerily staring at them. It's all so incredible. Roxy couldn't believe how incredible Gilgamesh's divine energy appeared to be. To her, it was just a warm golden breeze, and she didn't feel intimidated by it at all. She wondered if she saw that aura differently due to her relationship with him. The divine aura is a weakness for anyone who considers me their enemy. This is because, as I am between the division of a semi-god to a true god, my power was once the source of the creation of gods. But now that I am in another world, I might become a god, that is inevitable, by the way. After saying that, Gilgamesh materialized a golden aura in his hand and threw it forward as if it were a spear. Seeing the divine energy approaching, all the ancient shadows immediately retreated in quick succession. However, there was still one ancient shadow that was hit. It immediately writhed on the ground and met a lamentable death, like a dry, dead snake. Is that the power of divine energy? Roxy had heard of divine magic, so she asked, could you see what kind of monster is hiding here? Gilgamesh tilted his head and said, an ancient monster of the black adversity, that's what the last mage who sealed this place called it. In this world, I'm afraid this thing shouldn't exist in the first place. As they spoke, they entered a massive cave made of rocks that seemed endless. The eerie thing was that these rocks were as red as blood and emitted a mist like fog. The entire cave was shrouded in this bloody mist, almost blinding anyone who entered. Walking in this vast cave felt like walking in a hole made of blood. The interior was permeated with the smell of freshly spilled blood, which had been recently gathered for numerous murders, and was used to house a terrifying demon. Now, where are we? Even Kunsfeel felt a bit fearful upon entering the cave. He felt uncomfortable, as if there were malevolent magic in the air. The entity of the black adversity is supposed to be here. Gilgamesh, just minutes ago, had seen in the future that it should be in this place. At this moment, Roxy gently tugged at Gilgamesh's sleeve and gestured in another direction with her chin, saying, over there. Gilgamesh focused his gaze and saw a shadow in the distance. This shadow was shrouded in the bloody mist, so others couldn't see it clearly. From afar, it looked like a human, but not quite. On closer inspection, it was more like a small, swiftly moving fog. In an instant, the swords in Gilgamesh's hands shot out as fast as lightning towards the shadow in the bloody mist. However, the shadow was extremely agile. Sensing the danger of the swords, it immediately escaped at an even greater speed. The swords returned to Gilgamesh's hands, but they couldn't cut the shadow, and instead, they had allowed it to escape. The shadow knew how intimidating the approaching swords were, so it didn't reappear. Was that the entity buried here? Seeing Gilgamesh's failure to eliminate the entity, Roxy asked with concern. No. At this moment, Gilgamesh's eyes turned fierce, and he said coldly, someone else beat us to it, and it's possibly sent by that bastard. So, someone else got here first. Kunsfeel also looked around the bloody cave but couldn't find anything else. If it's not here, it must be in a different place. Gilgamesh analyzed the future more carefully and could see that a young man had been here. If that person got ahead of him in the future, it meant that his future had been observed and altered by the human god himself. Gilgamesh smiled and said, it must be in the other direction. Come on, let's go. Eris and Roxy looked around cautiously for anything suspicious, and Kunsfeel did the same. No one dared to ask questions at this moment. Gilgamesh, who had seen the future, knew this place like the back of his hand, and he even knew where the entity of the black adversity used to be. Although Roxy was extremely curious, she knew it wasn't the time to ask. However, in a different direction, a group that wasn't originally with the ones who had entered initially arrived. The group consisted of 9 members, and their leader was named Richard, an emperor of the sword from the Milis continent. They had followed the church group but had gone further in their direction. They found that there were fewer and fewer caves. As the caves converged, it was as if they were all coming together. All the adventurers and mercenaries who had gone in different directions were now walking together. However, they found that the shadows grew stronger and stronger. The shadows appeared more frequently and with even more power. Furthermore, even holy class mages couldn't handle them. This situation forced the groups of mercenaries and adventurers to work together, and all the mages worked as one. However, it still wasn't very favorable for advancing. When they had nowhere else to go and were cornered, countless giant shadows blocked the way out. With countless sounds, the now red shadows flooded the entire space like a tide. Ah! Screams echoed everywhere. Not to mention ordinary swordsmen, but under this situation, even many king and holy class mages couldn't hold their ground. A moment of inattention led to their deaths at the hands of the ancient shadows, their blood drained. There weren't many large caves left in this place. The 2 strongest groups were the one that had just entered, led by Richard from the Milis continent, and the elderly man who had tried to stop the fight before, Elder Boo. Because of this, they only had 2 paths ahead. In this chaotic battle, Richard and his old servant were also diverted into a cave due to a collapse. At this moment, there was no turning back. Richard had no choice but to go with the large group, but the ancient shadows attacking from behind became even more numerous, like the flow of an ocean. At this moment, all the adventurers found themselves in a dead end. They felt they were trapped in a snare. Powerful ancient shadows blocked their retreat and pursued them deeper into the caves. It seemed as if they were being drawn deeper into the nest. At this moment, the red shadows appeared, considering the intruders a delicious meal. They were entangled in their web, waiting for their delicious prey to arrive. However, for unknown reasons, wherever Richard went, he especially attracted the red shadows. They attacked him much more vigorously than the others. "Sister, what the hell are you doing here?" Richard yelled upon seeing his sister with a group of adventurers. However, he didn't have time to react because he was being attacked much more fiercely than others. At first, Richard was able to handle it, but later, he couldn't endure it anymore. Fortunately, the elderly man by his side took action. People began to realize that Richard was attracting the large shadows in great numbers, so many of them quickly moved away from him to avoid being attacked as well. Under the frenzied assault of the shadows, Richard and his old servant were forced back into a tunnel. This was a dead end. "Watch out!" Richard was nearly stabbed by an ancient red shadow. The old servant took action and cut the ancient shadow down completely. At this point, he finally revealed his true strength. Boom! 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 At this moment, the red shadows went berserk and pushed Richard against the wall. Suddenly, all the shadows entered this death cave like a flood, engulfing this hole along with their delicious prey. "Die!" The old servant roared loudly, and his aura as a powerful emperor of the sword pierced the sky. In an instant, he pounced on the red shadows and cut down countless of them, but an infinite number, like tides, kept coming. Boom! The old servant once again began his massacre. He swept through everything once more, but the vanguard of the red shadows was not deterred. Seeing the true strength of this elderly emperor of the sword, many adventurers from different paths were amazed. A sound of crack appeared, and blood sprayed into the air. Even though the old servant was powerful, he had to protect Richard while killing every trace of the shadows. A momentary lapse of focus allowed an ancient shadow to penetrate his shoulder. The elderly man cut the ancient shadow, but it was already rooted inside his body. This greatly changed the old man's expression as his whole body trembled. "Master!" Richard cried out in fear. He wanted to save him, but his body wouldn't allow him to do so. "Hide behind me!" The old man shouted and unleashed a sky-splitting move. However, at this moment, the ancient shadows had formed a huge nest, eager to devour the two. From behind, countless shadows were also rushing in, encompassing the entire cave. Daphne, Richard's sister, paled as she saw the distant signs of her brother's battle. She wanted to go to that place but was stopped by many adventurers. "Daphne, don't be impulsive, let's retreat." At this moment, inside the cave, the elderly emperor of the sword, who was actually Richard's master, was pierced by two ancient shadows in his shoulder once again. At this point, he was completely bloodied and ragged. Richard, with a fierce look, held off the attacks from behind and clung to his master. Chapter 171, Richard, the Sword's Son. Milis Continent. A few months ago. Have you heard the rumors about the fourth prince of the Azura Kingdom in the central continent? Yes, everyone says he's a demon, but mysteriously, everyone who talks about it dies the next day. Many have considered him a reincarnation of an ancient demon. They even say he rejects the gods and any religion related to it. Milis religion is the largest religious organization in the world, founded by Saint Milis, and is present in almost every continent where humans reside. Unfortunately for Gilgamesh, even if he wanted to do something against this religion, he could do little due to how deeply rooted it is in the hearts of humans. The Milis religion followed scriptures that stated all demons must be destroyed and rejected the demon race. However, 300 years ago, a priest read a scripture that said, all races are equal under Milis, and questioned whether the demon races are also equal. This caused a division among the priests and led the religion to split into two factions, which have been in a power struggle ever since. But those fights stopped when rumors of Prince Gilgamesh spread throughout the central continent and reached the ears of Papa Harry Grimoire, who by then was behaving strangely. His visions of the future began to appear, ranging from the large-scale massacre that occurred in the Central Sea, where most adventurers exploring a newly created dungeon died. He also announced the widespread elimination of nobles in the Azura Kingdom, which also happened. And as if that weren't enough, he also announced the progressive disappearance of all elves from the world, and as expected, it happened. But what shocked everyone was the announcement of the Mana catastrophe, which shook the entire Milis religion. Of course, the warnings arrived late in the central continent, and that's why most lives lost due to that catastrophe could not be saved until now. Nevertheless, Papa Harry Grimoire gained more influence, completely overshadowing the girl named Maiko, who could see people's memories just by looking into their eyes. Of course, Papa Harry Grimoire's visions were scarce, and his power was purely spontaneous. But in secret, he announced the birth of a demon who took over the body of a human and who will be the protagonist of the greatest lands ever in the whole world. For someone with such abilities, many thought that some of the demons of antiquity would take power again to terrorize humans. But when everyone discovered that this person would be the monarch of a human kingdom, everything changed abruptly. In secret, everyone turned their attention to Gilgamesh, and it was this boy who might cause trouble in the future. Fear spread in the hearts of those who believed in Papa Harry Grimoire's words, and that's when Gilgamesh, the fourth prince of the Azura Kingdom, was called a demon, who will possibly be the next protagonist of a great war. Richard Deluc, in the name of our sacred Milis, do you pledge to hunt down and eliminate the demon called Gilgamesh Azura? Your duty as a holy knight is to kill him with your divine sword and put an end to the future war that will shake us all. Papa Harry Grimoire ordered the holy knight named Richard Deluc, a powerful swordsman with the title Emperor of the Sword. Richard, who fully trusted Papa Harry Grimoire's words, nodded and said, "Yes, Papa Harry, I will purge the human of life with the sacred sword. Remember, the attack of the divine sword is unique, and you can only deliver one blow. That blow far surpasses the ordinary god rank and is explicitly prepared to eliminate him. You will even be able to simulate the ancient attack that was used against demons in the war." Yes, Papa Harry Grimoire. Richard Deluc, the Emperor of the Sword, found himself at a crossroads. He had been entrusted with a mission that was perplexing and challenging, to kill Gilgamesh, the prince of a powerful kingdom. However, unlike many impulsive knights, Richard was known for his prudence and wisdom. Before taking any action, he believed it was crucial to assess the situation and understand the reasons behind such a drastic order. From his perspective, he couldn't comprehend why he had been tasked with eliminating Gilgamesh. The prince, although arrogant and cruel to his enemies, had not given any reason to justify such an extreme command. Richard knew he couldn't act hastily and set out to thoroughly investigate before making a decision. Just as he was about to embark on his journey to assess the situation and determine the truth of the order, a young woman named Maiko crossed his path. This girl was known for her special ability, she could see people's memories and minds through visual contact. Intrigued by this unique ability, Richard listened attentively as she explained the true reason behind the order to kill Gilgamesh. Maiko confessed that the religion of Milis, which had been a fundamental pillar in Richard's life and that of many others, was becoming corrupted. A new source of divinity had emerged, along with a being that called itself the human god. This being had personally intervened in the memories of Cardinal LeBlanc Macfarlane, the religious leader of Milis, to prevent a confrontation between him and the faction led by Papa Harry Grimori. Maiko's words resonated in Richard's mind, causing him to doubt the purity of the religious leaders and high authorities in the Millis continent. She warned him that the entire religion was corrupting, and their plans were to gather the strength of various kingdoms to overthrow the mandate of Gilgamesh, the future emperor of the central continent. Additionally, she revealed that Gilgamesh was as powerful as a god and that they were using him as a distraction to gain time for their dark designs. The young Maiko, with seriousness in her eyes that left an indelible impression on Richard, recommended that he join Prince Gilgamesh's faction. Together, they could seek a way to alleviate the impending war and try to thwart the threat of the human god. When Richard asked Maiko why she offered her help, she simply responded with a somber tone, that human god is truly a bad person. Maiko's words echoed in Richard's mind, prompting him to reflect on the actions of religious and political leaders in Millis. He began to notice the abnormal behavior and hidden agendas underlying the upper echelons of the continent. The purity of his faith and loyalty to the religion that had been part of his life since childhood slowly faded away. As he delved deeper into his investigation, Richard discovered corruption within the ranks of the Millis religion. Religious leaders, instead of serving the welfare of the people, were manipulating the masses' faith to achieve their own selfish objectives. The religion had become a tool to consolidate power and control over people. In contrast, Prince Gilgamesh had proven to be a leader seeking unity and prosperity for his kingdom. Though ambitious, he was not the monster they had painted him to be. Richard began to question the motivations behind the order to assassinate him and concluded that he had been manipulated by the true villains behind the corrupt religion. Finally, when the day arrived, Richard embarked on his journey where he would meet Prince Gilgamesh and supposedly have the opportunity to kill him. However, he had a new goal: to tell him everything he knew, convinced that it was the only way to confront the human god and those who were contaminating his religion and continent. Everything he knew was just the tip of the iceberg. Richard knew that his loyalty and beliefs had changed forever, and now he fought not only for his kingdom but for the truth and justice that had been distorted by the dark interests of the higher ups in Millis. "Master!" Richard cried out in madness as he wielded his sword with fury. How did this happen? He needed to meet Prince Gilgamesh and warn him. He needed to do it. Chapter 172, Is This My End? Watching the group of adventurers where his younger sister, the one who had sworn not to take dangerous missions, now found herself in the most dangerous place in the world, Richard couldn't help but shout, "Master! Die!" While the old master protected Richard, he unleashed his power once again, pushing his initial abilities to the limit. At this moment, his body had been pierced by the red shadows, and he could only risk his life one last time. "Daphne, you must get out of here!" Daphne, Richard's younger sister on the other path, heard her sister's cries. Her expression changed dramatically, and hesitantly, she took a step forward. "Is he your brother? Then, you must reconsider, Daphne. Even two emperors of the sword may not be able to handle him. We must seize that opportunity and ensure his sacrifice is not in vain. We have to get out of here, or we will be a hindrance." At this point, countless shadows flooded the death cave where Richard was, like a tide, and the entire path was sealed. Boom! But then, in the blink of an eye, the whole world shook, and the area calmed. Everyone was greatly alarmed. Everyone saw a person, with extraordinary speed, rushing violently on his own through the shadows. Under his impact, the earth was mere dust. He easily penetrated the part that separated the cave from the outside and could even fly from the heights, descending and causing an unstoppable commotion. In an instant, 10 huge caves where there were blood shadows were swept away. Not even the large stones falling on his head could stop him. Boom! He swept directly in another direction with an unstoppable momentum and pierced the cave where Richard was. "He's not here." "You need help, I think you're a very interesting person." Gilgamesh waved his sword, and his path took him to Richard, along with his old master, out of the crevice in the blink of an eye. Braam! Braam! At this moment, all the ancient shadows went crazy and chased Gilgamesh's flight, who escaped with Richard hanging from his right arm, followed by millions of shadows. Seeing Richard and his master being taken by Gilgamesh, Daphne's expression relieved. "Daphne, while the shadows pursue them, if we don't leave now, we will really die." "Yes, let's go," Daphne silently uttered under a calm expression. She was here for her brother, but rushing forward would only result in her miserable death. Boom! Gilgamesh, like a golden titan, crashed to the ground through many holes. And right behind him, countless shadows pursued. Since their delicious meal was snatched away, these ancient shadows were truly furious. In an instant, not only those from the rear but from all directions reached where Gilgamesh was heading. Boom! 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 In a moment, sounds that could make your scalp tingle penetrated from all directions. Overflowing with numerous ancient shadows, all aiming at Gilgamesh, who remained remarkably calm under this situation. Boom! Finally, Gilgamesh brought Richard and his old master to a trap they had prepared beforehand. Roxy and Eris had hidden here before, witnessing the tide of ancient shadows. They immediately appeared and roared, unleashing darkness everywhere. Suddenly, countless golden chains shone brightly, sealing the space completely, and at the same time, they initiated their fierce attack, striking all the furious ancient shadows. Boom! Boom! In the blink of an eye, all the ancient shadows, like venomous snakes, were crushed onto the ground, shaking the earth. Hole after hole within the crater collapsed, causing the fleeing adventurers, who were getting farther and farther away, to be frightened. It was as if this area was sinking toward the center of the earth. A while later, all the shadows lay dead on the ground, like discarded dry snake skins. Gilgamesh's divine chains had obliterated their enemies with speed and intelligence. When all the shadows lay dead in this place, only silence reigned. The event that Gilgamesh was anticipating did not occur. I couldn't find him, and it seems he doesn't want to come out. Gilgamesh murmured as he looked at all the dead shadows. Earlier, he had taken Eris, Roxy, and Cussenfiel to another hole in a different direction. Since he still couldn't find the entity, Gilgamesh guessed that the entity was always on the move to escape the hunt. Therefore, he set a trap to kill a large number of evil shadows to provoke the dark entity and lure it out. However, even after killing so many, the entity still did not appear. Not bad, it can even withstand this. Gilgamesh was disappointed because he couldn't wait for that monster that could awaken for someone else. This underground area was huge, wanting to hunt down that entity that could freely traverse the earth was not an easy thing. Richard, at this moment, was in a deep stupor. He had no idea that, in the end, the one who would save him would be the man who came to kill him. Arg! Suddenly, Richard's old master wailed pitifully and fell to the ground convulsing. The shadows were cutting through his body, the red shadows inside his body visible along his muscles. He had been stabbed by several red shadows. Although he cut off the main bodies, these remnants inside his body continued to grow, and he couldn't suppress them. Master! Richard's pale expression turned grim, and he immediately wanted to move his master. Don't get close to him. Be wary of the shadows, they might enter your body. Richard coldly reminded and separated Richard from his master, then told Cussenfiel, open his clothes. Cussenfiel immediately opened the old man's garments. Gilgamesh then poured holy water over the wounds. The old man's body immediately trembled with pain, and he couldn't help but scream. How is my master? Richard urgently asked. His face was as pale as a sheet of paper. The shadows inside his body were like leeches splashed with hydrated lime. They crawled out of the wounds and then fell dead on the ground motionless. Gilgamesh smiled and said, he'll be fine, but I want to know one thing, what will you do now? What's the point of that question? Richard didn't know what to ask for a moment. Well, you have an interesting story to tell me, so I wonder, what will you do now? Chapter 173, What will you do now? What will I do now? Gilgamesh looked at this knight and said, you come from a very distant place, and I must assume it's because of my presence here. The question is not how I know but what you will tell me right now. Richard, looking at Gilgamesh in front of him, truly felt he was in the presence of a god whose strength could not be matched by anyone in this world. He had been foolish to think he could have killed him, but that no longer mattered now that he knew the truth, so he made a decision immediately. Bowing on one knee, Richard lowered his head and said, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Richard, and I am one of the divine knights sent by the Holy Church of Milis. I was given a special mission, and that is to kill you. What did you say? While Richard was immersed in his thoughts, the edge of a sword immediately pressed against his throat, and when he opened his eyes, he saw how his old master was targeted by several ice spears that lowered the temperature around them. If he said something wrong now, both he and his master would undoubtedly die. While Eris held the sword over Richard's neck, Roxy aimed her staff at the old master of the man who had just said he was here to kill Gilgamesh. No one was against killing, they themselves now only needed a small reason to eliminate these people. Cussenfiel stood by, stunned. How was he not aware of the situation a moment ago? When he heard the knight, whom Gilgamesh had just saved, mention killing him, he scoffed deeply in his mind, as trying to kill someone like him would require at least a true god, and he wasn't talking about the scale of this planet. Reconsider your words, death is not the only thing waiting for you. Roxy had never shown so many negative emotions together, but her eyes were as cold as winter. As for Eris, she wouldn't hesitate a second time to kill those who even thought of harming the people she cherished. If she hesitated again, she would prefer not to keep living. Richard turned pale and said, "That was the mission assigned to me by coming to this place. Of course, it was unthinkable for me to do something like that. What I come to bring you is a message, one that is about to change what we know today as the future and the past." Gilgamesh, needless to say, had seen Richard's past and realized what he wanted to tell him, so he simply said, "It started much earlier than you thought, a long time ago, I mentioned it, but honestly, it was just a joke." Eris looked at Gilgamesh and asked, "What does this man mean?" "Well, how do I explain it? In short, the Church of Milis was corrupted by my enemy, who is strategically targeting realms around the Azura Kingdom to attack it in a united assault. That is, we would be the public enemy of an entire continent and much more." Roxy frowned and muttered, "That's a good plan, but it doesn't amount to anything. Aren't we stronger than most conventional warriors in an army? It's strange, the one controlling those people should know that, so how is it that he hasn't considered that? Maybe what he's looking for is something else, something like a distraction." Eris looked at the edge of her sword at Richard's neck and muttered, "Perhaps it's a distraction, that's the best I can come up with." Gilgamesh nodded and said, "You're right, it could be a distraction, but things are extremely blurry, something that I find a bit perplexing. The future is disastrous, nothing is stable, and what is about to happen is like a confused mind not knowing exactly where to go. Isn't the future written?" Roxy murmured to herself, but her words were heard by everyone. "That's an easier way to explain it, the future is not written, and it's really strange. I suppose the numerous timelines we've created while trying to see the future are like a convergence effect. If there's a stable path, and we add a small branch to it, there will be a future effect that changed. If that changed future has a stone removed, then a new timeline is created, and the previous two are of no importance." Along with Gilgamesh's explanation, Richard was lost in his thoughts. So, if he knew it from the beginning by seeing it, why did he save him? It wouldn't be useful if his mission was accomplished in this place, so there was no need for him to be saved. If that's the case, perhaps his usefulness still holds some value in Gilgamesh's eyes. But what he didn't know is that this is not how the future Gilgamesh could see worked, but without expressing his questions, obviously, there would be no answer. Earlier, Gilgamesh took Eris and Roxy in search of the entity that had escaped from his seal but found absolutely nothing. Without any traces, he decided to go alone into each of the isolated caves to look for any trace of that entity and luckily encountered Richard, who, without thinking, helped him. Therefore, this meeting is just a mere coincidence. However, even after eliminating so many shadows, that thing that should supposedly be nearby never appeared. Not bad, your mission has been completed, so I appreciate it. Still, my question stands, what will you do now? Gilgamesh, who was a little uneasy about not being able to catch the entity that had escaped from this place, asked Richard. In this dangerous area, death is at every corner. The underground areas are enormous, wandering aimlessly is only seeking death. Richard, at this moment, was in a daze. He had no idea that, in the end, he would be left without a purpose in this life. It would have been better even to die, to lose one's desires is just a feeling of loss for him. At that moment, Richard's old master sat down with the support of his disciple. He looked at the doubts in the eyes of this young man and said, "Young Richard, it's still too early for your wishes to die in this place. Old master, please, don't educate me in this place. You must stay calm and rest, I will get you out of this place, or your daughter would hate me." Kunsfeel at that moment said, "Just rest, Grandpa, everything will be okay." Richard then saw the talking dog. Was that filthy dog a divine beast? "Lord Gilgamesh, for saving my only disciple, I am extremely grateful." Richard's old master finally stood up and expressed his appreciation towards Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh slightly nodded. Then, he looked at Richard and said, "You've come from afar to bring me a message, saving you is just a small admiration on my part for your principles." At this moment, Richard lowered his head in silence. This time, a couple of things had moved his heart, and unknowingly, he had already made his decision, allow me to pledge loyalty to you. Gilgamesh looked at Richard and asked, are you sure? I have nowhere else to go after failing. My sister will return to the Milis continent, so I only have one thing left, and that is to follow you. Gilgamesh looked at Richard with unknown thoughts and nodded, handing him a special sword and warning him about the consequences of betraying him. What do we do now? Unable to find the main entity of this place, a worried Eris asked. After everything that has been done here, nothing will catch its attention. Gilgamesh narrowed his eyes and said, this thing is cunning, however, I still have one more method. Even if it's a demon, it will still have to lick my boots. Come, let's go to a different cave. I don't believe it won't come out. As he was unable to lure it, Gilgamesh wanted to use something else that was in this place. Now that he hadn't found it with normal methods, before destroying everything in this place, he wanted to try new methods. Finally, Gilgamesh led the group to a different place. Richard, along with his old master, also followed. There were no more shadows as they traveled to a different place. The truth was that not only Gilgamesh, but even the other adventurers still in the other caves realized that the malevolent shadows were no longer appearing. The truth was that the ancient black adversity monster was aware of the danger and felt that someone was hunting it. Thus, it turned into a ghost, hiding underground, and no longer took action. It became inactive and waited, instead. Eventually, Gilgamesh and the others arrived at a large cave. This rocky cave was very large, however, without Gilgamesh leading the way, others would not be able to find it. There was something that looked like a giant box but also a bright stone platform. It is unknown what divine minerals this thing, which looked magical, was made of. It emitted a faint light along with a brilliant beam, resembling a very beautiful blood diamond. A crown was floating on top of this platform. On closer inspection, this crown was not made of divine material or magical metal. This black and white crown suspended above the platform, with careful observation, was found to be made of two types of woods, one black side and one white side. The black was like obsidian stone, the white was as white as a diamond. Seeing this black and white crown, others would think it was made of magical materials. However, Gilgamesh was not captivated by the crown. His gaze was on a pig statue. This huge pig statue didn't move but lay on the platform without moving. Gilgamesh stared intensely at this pig. His eyes became incomparably fiery, and he murmured, I never thought a pig could be a divine beast, it must be my pet. Chapter 174, The Altar. Gilgamesh regained his composure and walked slowly toward the stone pig lying on the shiny platform. He hadn't expected that this pig, which had been sleeping for thousands of years in this place, could have the ability to travel through space. What is that? Richard looked at the platform ahead and was stunned for a moment. Then, he tried to murmur something but was stopped by Kun's feel. SHH. Kun's feel whispered softly and gestured for Richard to be quiet. He, too, was looking at this stone pig on the shiny platform. He knew that Gilgamesh was about to capture a potential creature that only legendary men could do. This stone pig had a quite round body with somewhat short legs, and its small eyes could be seen. As for its skin, it couldn't be seen as it was covered in stone. Gilgamesh stepped onto the shiny platform, but the pig still didn't move. There was a seed on top of its huge head. The size of this pig itself was enormous, so large that Gilgamesh needed to fly to do what he intended. How many years do you have? 1,000, 2 or 3,000 years. I don't think I'll live more than 2,000 years, so I'd like you to be by my side on my journey through the demonic continent. At this moment, Gilgamesh understood why this pig didn't wake up. The problem was the seed on its head. Even Gilgamesh had to change his expression. He approached and looked at the seed. Then, he spoke slowly, it's incredible, I never would have thought that the seed of that plant existed in this world. The fruit of immortality, I have its plant now. Anyone who knew the origin of this seed would be surprised. The time he sought immortality, he found it, but when he plucked the fruit, everything that gave life to the tree began to wither. In that year, he knew that he held the last fruit of immortality that had been waiting for its harvest for thousands of years. It was then that he took it, but in the end, he decided not to eat it because there were some things he considered at that moment. The wisdom he gained in return for that became the reason he was loved by all. The approach he took at that time also helped him in the future war when everyone decided to stand in arms with him or challenge the gods. That war was memorable, those who lived and died in it are considered celestial warriors. In the last breaths of his life, he was considered by all humans as the emperor of humanity, the one who died standing, fighting against the gods on behalf of humans. When he was dying, he felt no regret, and that fruit resting in his treasury was forgotten in his memories. There was nothing more he could think about it. It was then that maybe he was considered a worthy heir of life, one who carries the mantle of mortals in each of his final decisions. Unexpectedly, after many recent events that had happened to him, things made no sense. Unexplainable enemies and unknown events that didn't seem to be of this world were calling him, but now he understands that this seed of immortality was calling him. All recent events might have happened for many reasons, but somehow this seed managed to connect with Gilgamesh so that he would be the one to germinate its essence and give life to new plants of immortality. As for the pig, it seemed to be a divine beast that initially caught Gilgamesh's interest because it could be an ideal beast for him to ride on this adventure he was having. After sleeping here for a while, the seed descended onto its head and sent it into an indefinite rest. Both had terrifying origins, and they were attacking each other. Eventually, the consciousness of the pig yielded, and it fell into a deep sleep. If it had taken longer, it would have been possible that the pig would never have awakened. "Can you hear me?" Gilgamesh flew in front of the giant pig and said, "Such a seed you have on your head. You couldn't escape from it even in another 1,000 years. How about we make a deal? You become my pet, and I'll help you get rid of that seed that has you imprisoned in this place. If we do nothing, that seed will eventually consume you, and your future will be very miserable." The huge pig opened its eyes, causing layers of stone to fall from its eyes. After a long time, it looked at Gilgamesh, and without a doubt, it agreed to the proposal. "That's how it should be." Gilgamesh smiled, and with a snap of his fingers, the chains of Enkidu appeared around ready to seal the seed if necessary. When the divine power in Gilgamesh's hands enveloped the seed, it shrank slowly, coiling as if wanting to protect itself. When the seed fell from the pig's head, it tried to shine, but at that moment, Gilgamesh's hand moved like lightning and caught it. "You are now mine, didn't you call me for this?" Gilgamesh trapped the seed in a treasure chest filled with ancient runes that sealed it. Although this plant of immortality was formidable, being inside the gate of Babylon is something no treasure can escape. Locked in that place, every treasure was at the mercy of Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh, who stored the seed, looked at the huge pig and said, "Don't you like to travel? Come on, we can see the world together from now on. In this world, only I can harness your true potential." At this point, it was tranquil. Then, its body began to tremble, and all the layers of stone began to reveal the lime green color of its skin. The huge size of its body was formidable, and its large back could easily accommodate a comfortable house according to Gilgamesh's thoughts. Seeing that stone statue turning into a huge divine beast, not only Roxy and Eris, even Richard and his old master were amazed. "Great catch, that's a legendary beast." Kunsfeel was thinking of other things when he saw this. "Is that more formidable than a dragon?" Eris exclaimed in amazement. Although it was a pig, its presence was much stronger than that of any creature they had ever been in the presence of. Eris thought that this huge pig was a mythical or divine beast. However, they didn't expect it to be something much more incredible than that. Gilgamesh, after sitting on the head of the enormous pig, said, "Its name shall be Killa, our dear Killa will now be our method of transportation." The group couldn't help but look at each other. The huge pig, now named Killa, was immediately considered by Gilgamesh as his new means of transport. Of course, the only one who didn't think this was strange was Kunsfeel, who, in the blink of an eye, was next to Gilgamesh. With this huge pig, Gilgamesh had the idea of asking the dwarves to make a head the size of a huge hat for Killa, who seemed to be able to withstand it. If he placed a house inside this pig, all his companions would be much more comfortable than traveling on the Vimana. At this point, Gilgamesh also took the floating crown of thorns. This crown was made similar to obsidian and diamond minerals. Black with white, an exquisite conviction. This crown on Gilgamesh's head was extremely heavy. So much so that when he stepped on the ground, it sank slightly. The moment the sword was on Gilgamesh's head for a minute, in a flash, it instantly unleashed two beams of light. One was as bright as the white glow of a rainbow, while the other was as dark as the aura of the underworld. The two beams twisted and circulated continuously, like a fish around its new bearer. Sleeping in this extremely serious state, this crown was perfect for a king, and on his head was the perfect place to empower it. Within the array of black and white rays, ancient runes floated. This light was as vast as endless oceans. Within this ocean of energies, there was great authority that encompassed the profound ancient truths from Gilgamesh's experience. I didn't expect it to represent the value of the ruler who wears it. It seems that my value is still unparalleled even in this world. In conflict, but harmoniously beautiful, now my thoughts are tiny, and I seem to have the authority to wear this crown. Holding this crown over his head, Gilgamesh sighed emotionally. This crown of terrifying origin was something decorative in Gilgamesh's eyes. Now, having the possibility of new fruits of immortality, there was nothing more sacred that he desired so fervently in this life. Even his enemies were insignificant in his eyes, something he would eventually eliminate without much trouble. A good crown. It's fitting for the future emperor of the central continent. Eris said these words confidently. There would be no better crown for him. At this point, Richard was also surprised. Seeing the bright platform absorbing the rays of bloody diamond, he said, "So, is this a weapon made by the gods?" No one perfectly understood treasures made by man, let alone by the gods. The crown, armor, and Enkidu's chains that Gilgamesh wore were a sign of that. Treasure of the gods. Gilgamesh laughed and shook his head. There are no gods in this place, so there are no treasures of the gods. If there are treasures of that magnitude, do you think humans could obtain them? No one can obtain a weapon from a god, wielding one means falling into the bottomless abyss. Since there are powerful beings, there is no possibility that they would allow them to obtain a treasure like this. Chapter 175, An Unexpected Fate. Let's leave this place, the entity of the black adversity won't appear, so we'll destroy this place directly to ensure nothing can enter here and, consequently, leave. Gilgamesh, seated on the head of the giant pig, instructed Roxy to manipulate the Vimana as he had taught her, and everyone gathered. But at that moment, the entire platform lit up with strands of bright, bloody lights. These rays of light intertwined into a network that spread throughout the underground. It seemed to be an endless network of some unknown energy, capable of destroying the entire underground area. Crack! In the center of the bright platform, a bloody ray pierced through the stone layer above their heads and shot into the sky. When this ray touched the sky, the bright platform emitted even more colorful lights. These strands of light were no longer magical, they were more like flowing blood strings. These bloodied strings gathered and turned into a bloody petal that pierced through the entire underground world. When Gilgamesh saw this, his eyes shone golden, and he murmured, "Once again, the future has changed." Seeing the bloody light from the bright platform, Richard said with a cold expression, "The night of blood, the rise of a dark being. The light that attracted all living beings, the light that made them think there was some kind of treasure here, flickered in this place. This is curious." Gilgamesh seemed to awaken from his thoughts and looked around as he explained, "It seems this is a prison, precisely something to trap those who would want to take the crown." Gilgamesh, who had stood up, slowly closed his eyes and murmured, "Listen to my words, do not stand in my way." Boom! A loud explosion occurred. The bright platform flew upwards and hit the ceiling. By then, Gilgamesh had told Roxy to prepare, and she created a shield to cover everyone on the back of the giant pig, Killa. The rays were like an unstoppable waterfall, piercing downwards into the ground. What is that? At this moment, many more adventurers who had ventured into the underground world and armies of nations that wanted to investigate the mysteriously opened gates were close to the light. Many of them, through the bright scene, saw a platform rising into the sky. In turn, they noticed the blood-red cascade falling torrentially down, causing them shocking surprise. "Is that a magical target?" an adventurer murmured. At the top of the bright platform, Gilgamesh looked around. However, he couldn't find the monster that had escaped from this place anywhere. Someone else must have helped him. It's not possible for him to escape my eyes, let alone my perception. If my intuition doesn't fail me, it seems that idiot god is planning something. Gilgamesh released his Enkidu chains and slowly wrapped them around Killa's body, which was shaking from side to side due to the strong blasts. "Have you been here before?" Seeing Gilgamesh having an answer for absolutely everything, Richard asked with curiosity. This question was normal, after all, how could he know every answer in just a few seconds? Upon hearing this question, the group following Gilgamesh couldn't blame Richard. It was as if there was nothing that could be hidden from Gilgamesh's eyes. "Listen, young lad, everything my eyes can see is nothing compared to what you can see. Just think that I am incredible, so naturally incredible that no man or god can compare to my greatness." "This is nothing surprising," Gilgamesh said calmly as he looked towards the sky. Gilgamesh's words suddenly made Eris and Roxy blush. They weren't as straightforward as to tell a stranger about their greatness. Perhaps Eris might, but she has been behaving more reserved lately. Just at that moment, many adventurers who had made their way inside the cave hurriedly emerged from beautiful caves. After the malicious shadows halted their offensive, although all the experts from the new adventurers and small army units of nations rushed forward, they couldn't find anything but blood. That's when they saw the clear and bloody rays spreading everywhere like a river of blood. Everyone got excited, thinking this was the appearance of a magical treasure, so they all sought the origin of the light. The treasure of the gods. The eyes of many dreamers reddened with excitement. Everyone with a chance climbed mountains and ascended towards the sky where the bright platform was suspended. Humph! At this moment, Richard's old master snorted coldly and took a step forward. Suddenly, the battle aura of a sword emperor was released unabashedly forward, hitting many adventurers who wanted to approach and giving them a powerful push. This was a sword emperor, the nearby sword kings didn't dare to approach. But many secretly launched attacks on the bright platform, as if trying to bring it down. Attack after attack reached the platform, and everyone began to surround it. Without Gilgamesh's command, the old master stepped out as his battle aura roared with killing intent. Anyone who wanted to come would have to pass through his sword first. Since he owed his life to Gilgamesh's group, that debt would be difficult to repay, so at this moment, he was willing to resolve any problems that arose. That's a divine treasure. The mages rushed in masses from the ground but stopped when they saw the dazzling violent bloody rays from the platform. At this point, their preconceived notion was that the treasure released by this dungeon was on the bright platform. A treasure that could make them gods, how could they not be excited? However, with an old sword emperor blocking the front of the attacks, no power dared to go all out. Many gave up and retreated just to watch. If they advanced now, all they would do is die. At this moment, with the violet aura, a group forcefully emerged from a cave in the ground. Then two powerful battle auras rose from the ground. Are those two of the three emperors of the north? Behind them, there was a young man with a huge snake tattoo on his forehead. They stood in front of Gilgamesh and advanced towards the battle aura covering the entire platform. The one at the front was a nobody, no one knew him. Even if he was powerful, no one had heard of him, but seeing that he wasn't afraid of that distant battle aura made people believe he was powerful. As the group ascended on what seemed to be a flying platform, the gazes of both groups met. The one at the forefront was a young man, seemingly unremarkable except for his strength. At this moment, Gilgamesh and the unknown group led by the young man were the most powerful groups daring to confront each other. Seeing more and more people gathering, and the monster still keeping hidden, Gilgamesh smiled coldly and calmly told Richard's master, "Elder, these are peculiar guests. There's no need to scare them." The old master looked at Gilgamesh and nodded, then quietly returned to the back of everyone, just by his side. Anyone who wanted to approach, he would be the first to react. "How about it? Are you all looking for the divine treasure that this platform released?" Then, the young man in front of the group stepped forward with a piercing look towards Gilgamesh. After a few seconds, he spoke with a highly threatening voice, "Hand over all the treasures you found, and I'll leave immediately." There was hatred in his gaze, and it was obvious that it was directed at Gilgamesh. However, there was a problem: no one knew him, not even Eris or Roxy. Everyone here knew their stuff. Seeing the enigmatic golden armor and shining crown on Gilgamesh's head, they immediately speculated that this was what he had found. However, as the mysterious young man wanted that treasure, no one here dared to say anything. "There's a small inconvenience: this crown can only be worn by a future emperor, and a brat like you doesn't have the right to wear it." Gilgamesh narrowed his eyes and smiled. There was no trace of anger in his gaze. Kunsfeel and Richard on the side were completely stunned by this exchange of words. Divine treasure? They knew there was no such thing. Even the crown that Gilgamesh put on was just an ornament in their eyes, so he was only deceiving these people. Eris gave them a sympathetic look. They wouldn't even know the way they're going to die. She didn't know if these were just decoys, but asking for something from Gilgamesh is like inviting death. As arrogant as the rumors say. "I suppose I should kill you." With a majestic aura, the young man at the forefront of the new group said, "My name is Alexander, and I tell you to give me that crown on your head, and I'll make sure no one harms you. I care little about your name, you're a complete stranger in my eyes." All the other adventurers saw that look from Gilgamesh and swallowed saliva eagerly. "Do you think you're the only one with the right to obtain something from this place?" Gilgamesh observed everyone around him and said in a very calm tone, "It seems that taking this crown has resulted in several unexpected incidents.
Thanks for listening.